What's up, friends? It's Tuesday again. Let's see. How is everybody? How y'all doing? It is I'm just, I found out that I think the streams start at different times. So sometimes it starts when I think it starts, and sometimes it cuts me off mid-sentence. So I'm gonna ramble for a few seconds to make sure that we don't get cut off. What's up, Vinny? How you doing? Um, so yeah, I today wanted to just kind of, it's the end of the year. This is going to be the last stream I do for the year. I'm honestly kind of going into like I'll be doing email and stuff, but I'm done after today. Really, next week is the Christmas holiday, and then a week after that we've got some downtime between Christmas and New Year's, and then I think really after Wednesday, as far as I know, everybody's out on vacation, right? So there's no one, even if it's as they say in the Muppets Christmas Carol, there will be no one to do business with. So no point in hanging out, right? Just do some recharging, relaxing. I've been reading a whole bunch of books lately. I was in. Has anybody here read Dungeon Crawler Carl? So I tend to read like sci-fi, fantasy, general fiction kind of stuff, just because when I'm not working, I don't necessarily want to be doing something that's I don't know. I used to read a lot of business books, and these days, what I found is that a lot of the business books that get written today are largely citing business books that I read in the early 2000s, which is kind of an interesting thing to age into, where like you've read the source material for a lot of the stuff that gets released, which is good and bad, I think. I mean, good because it means that a lot of those books are more refreshers than new stuff, so I don't feel guilty for not reading a lot of them. But bad because it is interesting, like how much of this stuff is just like repeating the same things, and I'm guilty of it too. If you go back and watch my streams, we talk a lot of the same concepts on this show, and I think that sort of points to the idea that a lot of this stuff is kind of boils down to a handful of cliches, and the hardest part of being alive is surviving long enough to realize that all those cliches actually apply to you also. Muppets Christmas Carol last night. Hell yeah, we watched Muppets Christmas Carol like 3 days ago, I think, and it was awesome. What's up, Bridgewater? How you doing? Yeah, I've heard the audiobook is really good. I'll make a confession. I've never like listened to an audiobook. I for as much audio content as I generate, I'm actually not very good at consuming audio content. It's hard for me to stay focused. So I prefer reading. Um, but so yeah, so Dungeon Crawler Carl is a like a super lighthearted. Well, lighthearted is maybe the wrong word. It is like a comedy lit RPG kind of thing it like touches on some heavy material, but it's not necessarily I feel like some books are really dark and are sort of there to just be depressing. Like I just recently read the whole Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is this kind of like fantasy classic, or maybe not even a classic. Like it's a book that gets talked about a lot, and it's a monster. It's like 10 books. Each of the books is Game of Thrones thick, right? And I think I read that, took me months. I think it might have been like most of what I did this year was read that series. And I got to be honest, it is a really well written book, but God, the whole thing was just like getting kicked in the heart over and over again. It was so heavy, it was so dark, it was so depressing. It's just like this story of like everybody losing, and that's not. Sometimes those stories are really fun, but they're generally a little too heavy for this. So so I like stuff. One of my favorites is Terry Pratchett and Discworld, and I think because it's like not afraid to touch on something satirically, but it also doesn't, doesn't just plunge you into the despair of a lot of this stuff. And I think, that's I don't know, I feel like that's one of those things that I look for is a story that it can challenge something without necessarily, um I've heard of, like, some of these books honestly are just they just sort of read like torture porn, like, it's like, "Hey, how many terrible things can I do to this character, as in the course of this story?" And I don't really like that, like, it's, like, there's a similar genre of movie, which is sort of like you watch a hero just get beat into a pulp the whole time, and they finally barely at the end, like, squeak through in the movie. And that's like, I think there's a way that that can be fun, I think, like, Die Hard is sort of that kind of movie, but I feel like there's this line that you cross where they go from being fun to watch to being sort of like, "Oh, geez, here we go again." You gotta kinda, like, steel yourself against it. And people were talking about, like, what's a movie that was so good that you'll never watch it again, and I feel like that's the category of movie I'm talking about. And I think it's the same with these books, like, I think, the Malazan Book of the Fallen is one of those ones. It's like, it was a good book. I wouldn't actually recommend it to anybody. It was so well written, there's a lot of beautiful scenes in it, and it just constantly made me sad. And so I haven't, like, recommended it as a book that people should read because it's just like, Jesus, like, what a heavy thing. Um, Dungeon Crawler Carl is different. I think it's, like, written in a fun way, and it tackles heavy subject matter, but in a way that is not, not, like, reveling in the suffering, if that makes sense. It's sort of it feels more Die Hard in the, like, put into an impossible situation, things are really tough, but you just kinda have to get ingenious with the virtually nothing that you have and find a way through. That it feels like spiritually similar, right? So, it's still goofy and violent and all that kind of stuff, but the premise of it is like this guy Carl gets thrown into a world that's effectively like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing. Like you get skills and there's magic and you have to level up and it's a genre I've heard called lit RPG, which I'm not super familiar with, but if you've watched the anime Solo Leveling, it's got like similar vibes to that. It's similar vibes to in certain ways like Terry Pratchett because it pulls in a lot of kind of absurdist stuff and like kind of silly satire that's fun. But anyways, a good thing to watch or a good thing to read, and that is my intention. I After Thanksgiving, I actually read 3 books, 3.5 books over the course of like 3 days, which was I haven't done that forever, and none of them was a business book. I was like fully unplugged from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Just like didn't even look at my computer, didn't look at my email, just read books. It was awesome. And that's my plan for after Christmas, right? Is to kind of just take and do very little. And I actually think there is, right, you ready for me to make a business lesson out of this? I think there's strategic value in that sort of thing because there's some research that's been done about how like how we function, like how our brains work. And we know that not getting enough sleep, like sleep sort of acts as a um like a cleaning mechanism for your brain. It's sort of I don't remember exactly what it does, but it's like the process of sleeping is actually sort of like fixing your brain. And so if you don't sleep, it can cause issues and you get like exhaustion and all this stuff. Marissa's staring at me like I'm making shit up. What does it do?
It removes the protein. Oh my goodness.
Look how little you
It
are.
removes the protein buildup in your brain when you sleep.
It removes
cleans it out.
Yeah. And so
Okay, bye.
okay, bye. The process of sleeping is like really, really important. And if you don't do it, it removes your ability to think critically. It starts to like damage your critical thinking and your creativity and all of these things. And if you I think similarly, like boredom is a pretty critical part of creativity and kind of recharging. And there's light research on this. There's some interesting like pop sci books that don't necessarily have like rigorous research, but they have a lot of good anecdata. Um, where the general idea is that if you don't disengage, you aren't able to do some of the lateral thinking. And there's a lot of good research about, for example, taking a walk being really good for creativity, or just generally, like, if we've done this as engineers, you're stuck with a bug and you get up and you take a walk, take a shower, eat dinner or something, and like that act of stepping away from the problem, you come back and suddenly you can see the answer. And I actually think that some of the theories around this, and the one that I agree with, is that if you disengage from the material, if you get bored, if you're walking, if you're doing something that has your brain turned off, you're allowing your subconscious to sort of sort things. And by letting it sort things, you start to make connections that weren't there before. And that's where a lot of the creativity comes. So you know, for me, at least, I think a big secret to my overall success is that I have been able to do a lot of different things. So I have a lot of like weird, varied experience. I have always, since I was in my early 20s and I had I guess my mid 20s, and I had my health scare with like overwork and stress, I've been really diligent about trying to sleep enough. Like I start to get panicky if I have a sustained period of like 6 hours of sleep a night. I'm like, oh man, I'm like, I can tell that I'm hurting myself. And so I'm very like, okay, I need 7+ hours minimum every night, or else I kind of start to like cancel plans so that I can focus on sleep. I'm very much an in bed by 9 kind of person. Like, 9 o'clock rolls around and I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I should be in bed. Um, and the varied experience, the regular sleep schedule, and then also I focus on trying to give myself just some periods of like forced disconnection. And I've done this in a few different ways. When I had my big health scare where I was like so stressed that my beard started falling out, I spent time in Alaska, and I very forcefully removed myself from everything. The place that I was called Thorn Bay, and it's only accessible by seaplane. And I was out there in a place where like there wasn't phone service, and the internet was so slow that it took us like 40 minutes to download a fishing license. Like just absolutely no chance that I was going to work while I was there. And so I went out there and I did a bunch of things that I would never do. Like I set out crab pots, and we like caught our own crabs, and then we had to kill them and process them, and we cooked them, and we made our own. Like it was like this full like hunter gatherer forager thing that I'd never done. I wouldn't, probably wouldn't do maybe once or twice for the rest of my life. Like it's not a thing that I was like, wow, this is who I want to be. But it was this forced disconnect that was unbelievably good for letting me just get some distance between the stuff that I do for work and who I am as a person, and like reassess, why do I do this stuff? And since then, I feel like that was a kind of an eye-opening moment for me. And since then, I've tried to build that in intentionally in less burn it all down ways. So for example, Marissa and I, we try to go camping with our friends once a year. And like, I'm not like a tent camper. Honestly, my ideal version of camping is we found this thing that was a tiny house on an old campground. So you had like a bed and running water and a small kitchen, but it was out in a place that didn't have cell service, didn't have internet. You just kind of, it was a campground, but instead of a tent, you had a tiny house, right? It was great. I loved it. And we try to do that for, 3-4 days at a time so that we're just disconnected somewhere. And then, most recently at Thanksgiving, like giving myself permission to like, you know what, I'm not going to open my computer. Like, I'm not going to open my computer. I'm not going to stress about social media. I'm not really looking at email. I'm just going to be turned off, because who's working the day after Thanksgiving in the United States? Like nobody. And everybody can wait until Monday. Like it's fine. So those periods of disconnect allow me to not get like bored, but they allow me to get close to bored. And I think there's something really important in that, because it, like, for example, I did this thing over Thanksgiving, and I came back with this like really wild idea that I've been harassing a good friend of mine about because I want to make it. And you're probably sick of hearing about it, but like that distance sort of allowed me to click some pieces into place. And those of you who are in the supporters only chat have heard me talk about it on the Code TV Discord, which I can look at that. I can do that now. So we've had really good, like I've had really good luck with good sleep and forced disconnection. And I think it's really, really, really easy to never get that disconnection anymore, because we're always like, you can be on your phone and it's so simple to just quickly check your email, to just quickly glance at the social media comments, to just do that, send off that one text to a coworker about this thing you're working on. And I don't necessarily think that that's bad. Like a lot of the time, that is how I operate. I'm out at dinner and I'll just, Marissa goes to the bathroom. I'll just quickly scroll through email and it lets me sort of like stage that stuff in my brain for tomorrow. But that doesn't mean that it should always happen. Like I think there's a point at which I get so close to everything that it starts to feel like it's like a bit disillusioning. And I think that's really, really challenging. Oh yeah, you saw the Free Code Camp interview? Man, that was such a fun interview. Let me find the link to that actually, because that one was awesome. How do I find that? Free Code Camp? That off. How do you even find things on here? Here it is. Okay, so this is the interview that I just did. If I can find the chat. And this was a conversation I had with Quincy Larson. It was a really good one. He had a bunch of questions about like, what's going on with the job market, what's going on with AI, and I am just tired, so I didn't hold back. And I don't know. I'm not really a hot takes person, but I think it's a very like honest interview, if that makes sense. It's the Overcommitted podcast. That's not it. And then where is this? Here it is. So then I also did this interview with the Overcommitted podcast, which is Brittany Ellick and a few other folks that I hadn't met before. And they were awesome as well to talk to. And so all of these, by the way, I'm going to put into the show links on the Discord so that we have a record of those. So you can find those over there. Again, the Discord is at codetv.link/Discord. That'll get you in there. But so, the bun acquisition was a huge signal. I mean, I don't know. I think the thing that I'm confused about at this point is just, I haven't seen. I just don't feel like I'm seeing anything that resembles an actual business plan. Like it all just kind of seems like keep investing and eventually it's going to work out. And I don't know. It doesn't seem like I haven't seen a path to profitability that isn't everybody comes so dependent on this that it basically becomes taxes. And the fact that they're asking for government bailouts highly indicates to me that the plan is become too big to fail as fast as possible, so that when the bubble does pop, the people in charge get a nice little like money parachute. And I don't particularly care for that. Like I think that's a bad way. It's a very cynical way to exist in the world, is like take something that you can market it so hard that everybody starts to believe it's a miracle, and then position yourself to get a government bailout because it's not real. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll find a business model that I'm not thinking about, but like it really doesn't seem, I don't know, it doesn't seem like something that is going to materialize in a way that isn't drastically rolled back from what they're promising now. So anyways, going back to this concept of I mean, the AI ML stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is like we have been on the precipice of AGI, I don't know how many times since the 60s. Like every time computers learn a new trick, somebody decides they're conscious, and then it starts, you know, at varying levels of silliness, this hype cycle. And I think right now we're in the silliest version of this, because we've allowed the computers to anthropomorphize themselves to a degree that is I think like exploiting our worst tenant. Well, not even our, it's like one of our best tendencies as people, but in this particular case, it's almost weaponized against us. Like we are inherently social and we're inherently empathetic. Like if I take this pen, right, and I put googly eyes on it and I start talking to it and I give it a name, it starts to feel like, you know, it's a puppet. It's like Elmo, whatever. And if you saw somebody on TV like rip Elmo's head off, you'd oh my God, I can't believe they did that to Elmo. But like Elmo is a piece of cloth with googly eyes, right? And we've anthropomorphized him and he's got a personality, and we think of him as a character and all that stuff, right? We get, you know, we get attached to fictional characters. The problem is that computers right now, the LLMs in particular, are representing themselves as personalities. And those personalities are anthropomorphizing these programs in a way that we then inherently feel empathy toward. And that empathy causes us to get, you know, basically it just like confuses us. And we're seeing like extreme cases of this, and the really tragic stuff, like the kids who are committing suicide, and the people who are going like fully deranged and like having mental breaks because they're letting the LLM steer them in weird ways. But there's also just the general thing. Like it's super odd to me that we're having conversations about whether or not LLMs deserve rights. Like to me, that is such a sign that we've been hoodwinked, because we know the underlying technology is not conscious. It's a great big pattern matching algorithm. And that's not like, yes, human cognition is kind of pattern matching, but it's not just that. And that would be, I don't know, it's like if somebody from the 40s came to today and they heard your phone, you know, Siri kicks on and it goes, oh God, the phone is conscious, and it starts to like treat it like a person. It's not, we know better, but a lot of people don't know better. And I think the people who are in the cynical position of just trying to extract cash know better and are intentionally misleading people because they know they'll get more cash if they do that. And so I think that's sort of a thing, right? But yeah, yeah, Elmo isn't real. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to shatter your reality. But yeah, let's get back to the original idea about spending some time with yourself, because I think I called this episode the hardest thing about doing hard things. And my thinking on that is like, it's the end of the year. Everybody's starting to do their 2026 planning. I was just at reInvent. I had some really, really good meetings when I was there. I've been working on some projects. Like there are projects that I've been working on since honestly 2020, right? So I'm 5-6 years into this process of trying to get these things in my head to be real. And some of them are, I think, a direct outcome of this idea of like spending time with yourself, of being bored enough to be able to get creative or to work through a weird idea, to connect some dots that maybe previously wouldn't have connected. And many of them are really, really big ideas. So kind of a clumsy segue, but I'm just going to dive right in. And so I have been trying to do some of these things for a very, very long time. And almost all of them that I haven't already done are too big for me to do on my own. They require more funding than I have access to. They require more people than than me. There's some level of like, it's too big to do alone. And I think that a lot of sufficiently ambitious goals just by necessity, they're going to be group efforts, because a lot of things, most of the things that are worth doing, I think are worth doing because they're accomplished with a group. Like, that's what makes them memorable. That's what makes them fun. That's what makes them impressive, is like, God, how did anybody coordinate all this and make it happen? Um, and I think, for me, some of these big projects are going on 5 years, 6 years in development. And every single one of them, I have a clear plan for like how I would go from nothing to the initial iteration, like a pilot or a first series, a first run, the first experiment, the first iteration in the project. And that is all hard. Like, there's a lot of work that went into that. There's a lot of planning and budgeting and contacting different vendors and professionals and contractors and saying, like, okay, what would it take for me to do this? How much would you charge me if we did this sort of thing? Like, who else do we need on this project? Like, really starting to understand, what does the crew look like? What is the, how aggressive is the production design? What are the legal requirements? Who needs to be there? What does it cost to have them there? Though that stuff is all really hard, because especially when it's something you haven't done before, most of what you're doing is like building a mental model of an entire new space. You're learning a completely different skill. And that part is hard. It's also hard to sell things. Like, it's really hard to walk into a room and look somebody in the face and say, like, I need you to give me a whole lot of money. And I think that part is really hard. But I think for me, the hardest part that I've run into is the amount of like patience it requires to get something like this done, because you have to, in order to do something like this, it's not just have a great idea and then, sell it and then it's going to work. It's like, you're going to get told no constantly, because most of the time when you're trying to pitch something brand new, like, there are going to be things you haven't thought of that aren't going to work out. There are going to be a lot of objections on, like, well, why do we have to do it this way? I've given that talk about being unreasonable. There's almost always an alternative that would be easier, that's a little more well established. Um, and more importantly, like, people just don't have time, like, think about how busy any one of us is on a given day. And then imagine somebody came to you with something super ambitious, and you don't quite understand what they mean, and you're not quite sure what they're asking of you. And you don't know if is this like, if I say yes to this, am I on the hook for a whole bunch of work? Like, I don't think so. I don't think I can do that. Right. That's a completely reasonable response, because people come to me all the time with ideas. And generally speaking, my response is, I don't think I have time. Like, this is a great idea and I can't do it. And so I'm very empathetic toward that, but it's really hard as the person who has the vision, who cannot do that vision without getting somebody else on board, to see exactly where you want to go and not know how to get from here to there. Um, and the patience and the persistence and the sort of willingness to believe in yourself that it requires to do that is just really taxing. Like, I've been sitting on this idea for a really long time. I want to build like a software hardware escape room is kind of the idea. Like, I want to team up with a company and do this thing. And I've probably pitched this now to a dozen companies, like maybe more. And every time the conversation is like, this is incredible. We should, let's talk it through. Let's see how this works. We get, up through budgeting. They're kind of like, yeah, I think that could be doable. Here's the variables. And then it is just always kind of hit this, like, I just don't know if we've got the bandwidth for this, or like, the budget's a little bit steeper than we want it to be. I think we got to put this on ice until next year. And so, we're years later now. The idea has become more refined, and I'm facing less like, but how would that even work objections. But it still hits a lot of, it's just a little beyond what we have time for. It's a little beyond the budget that we've got available. We've got a set, like, existing contracts that conflict with this, and it just makes it too complicated. There's always something happening, right? It just pushes it a little further down the road. And it's so, like, disheartening every time that happens, because, you get this sense of hope. You have that first meeting and it's like, oh, this is going to be a slam dunk. Like, everybody loves this. We're all really excited. The ideas were flying about how we would incorporate the tech into it, how we'd make sure that, this thing happens and that thing happens, and how we could get the sponsors involved, and like all this, the ideas are just, it's a fire hose. Everybody's pumped. And then when the practical part comes, and it's kind of like, okay, well, where does this budget come from? Who's actually going to be responsible for it? Who's at fault if this doesn't work? And inevitably people start to kind of pull away from it. And then it's just too much, right? It's what, we want to do it, but we can't do it right now, or let's revisit it in 6 months. Let's revisit it next year. And it's always, you kind of have to walk into any negotiation like this assuming you're going to lose the deal, but believing that you can close it. But that doesn't make it any less of a bummer when you lose it. And so I think that's kind of the ongoing game here is, if you want to do a hard thing like this, like, because this is something that's going to cost well over $500,000. Like, it's a huge build. It requires a ton of professionals. It's, the materials alone are extremely expensive. It's a lot of custom software. It's a lot of custom hardware. It's a lot of like actual fabrication and just like construction. There's a lot of safety considerations. There's the development of the game itself. Like, there's a lot that goes into something like this. And so it is understandably a big swing for anybody to partner up with me on. It's a risk. It's the sort of thing that, like, if I don't execute perfectly, it could end up really embarrassing the company, because I wouldn't pull through and they would have like a blank spot where they were supposed to have this thing. So, I need to be able to convince somebody that I'm not only capable of having an idea, but like delivering the idea, right? And every year it gets easier because people are seeing more and more of what we're doing at Code TV, but we still haven't made one of these. We haven't done this. And so even though I can point to a bunch of TV shows, I can't point to an existing, like, hey, here's the escape room we built. We just want to build another one and it would work like this. And so it's also that chicken and egg problem of, like, once you've done a thing, people will come and hire you for it. Like Web Dev Challenge, I think, is a really good example. I pitched Web Dev Challenge for at least 3 years before I was able to get it made. And when I did finally get it made, it was because I split the cost with a sponsor. Like, I paid out of pocket to make the first episode of Web Dev Challenge. But as soon as anybody saw it and it was real, they said, you've done this. We liked it. We want one. And that really changes the entire game. And I think that's the other thing, is like, it could have gone wrong, and I could have made something that wasn't what people wanted. And I've done that. There are shows that I've made that have just, it was like, I'm not mad at them. I'm not sad, but like they didn't land the way that Web Dev Challenge landed. And so there's always the risk that you take a big swing on something and it just doesn't work. And as the numbers get higher, the willingness to take those big swings gets lower. And for me, I'm always trying to figure out how we can go a little bit further, how we can do a little bit more. And so that is an ongoing struggle, but it also means it's an ongoing escalation of budgets. And so maybe there's a world in the future where, we've got enough viewer support that we can like save up for 6 months and throw, just do it as a Code TV production to like get the first one out of the way and show people that we can do it. But that's not in the immediate future, right? That's a ways out. And I guess what I will say to that is, if you do want to help us, you can go subscribe to the Code TV site, become a supporter. Let me put a link up here. You can go hit this Code TV support. Oh, it's Glass Day. You can go support us. That's, anywhere from $5 to $20 a month, and you can help us put money in that bucket so that we can just self-fund this stuff, which would be great. But in the meantime, we need partners. Squid Game, but for devs. Yeah, probably not full Squid Game, just because the angle of that, I think, is a little darker than Code TV usually goes. But I think, like, we've played with the idea of what if we made American Gladiators, but for developers? Or what if we played with games like Survivor or with Legends of the Hidden Temple? Those types of games I think are really fun. And I go TV dark mode. We'd probably need a different host for that, but that would be really funny, actually. Let's see. There's a couple questions in here that are. Yeah. Do you usually have a clear idea of who you want to work with if it's a group project, or is it pretty open? It's usually like a category, right? So for example, when I was thinking about Web Dev Challenge, it wasn't like whoever's interested. It was, it has to be a company that is a tool that can be used in a web dev project that is scoped in such a way that there's like a visible use case for it, right? So like something like Datadog, for example, probably isn't a good fit for Web Dev Challenge because what would we do? Like, what could and maybe there's some use cases I'm not thinking about, but generally speaking, like logging would be a different kind of show because it's not really like, there's not like a web dev project that would easily integrate logging in a way that would be visible. Like you would just sort of be spinning up a template and adding logging. But then, what is the project? Like, how do we show off that sponsor's tool? And the short answer is I think it would be really difficult. Same with like, Google Analytics probably wouldn't be a good partner for a web dev challenge. So a lot of times what we're doing is we're kind of coming up with ideas, and then we sort of think about what categories is this applicable for. And so something like Leet Heat, wide open. If you want to sponsor a category on Leet Heat, it can be trivia about your area of expertise, or if you want, you can just sponsor a category that is fun. And it's a brand awareness play. It's like sponsoring a conference where you get your logo on the wall. And so for us, that's a much more like open-ended, anybody can sponsor it. With the escape room idea, it could be like anybody sponsors it, and the tech specifics of it aren't important, right? It's just, here's this cool thing and it is what it is. But the best sponsor is probably somebody who has a tool that ties in well with the sorts of things that we do. So like an orchestration tool would be really good. A workflow tool would be really good because we could do something like have the pressure plates on the wall that fire off a job, and then that job is running, all the pressure plates are firing off a job in parallel, and they all have to complete within X milliseconds of each other to prove that you have actually pressed all of them correctly at the same time. And that's what unlocks the door, right? So those sorts of tools would be highlighted really well by this sort of build. Whereas something like, but like we could also do it with things like a CMS. It could be kind of fun to build a narrative escape room where like the CMS is holding all that stuff. And you can actually, with something like Sanity, you have the ability to change things in real time. So you could also like make it so that the actions in the escape room would update the CMS, which would trigger some real time thing that would trigger the escape room to modify. Like there's a million ways that we can tie this stuff in, right? And this is part of the game, is as you design these ideas, how creative can you get about how you would fit a tool into it? Like is it possible to, like, could a logging tool be a good fit for an escape room? And I think the answer is yeah. You could probably build some interesting visualizations that would show like exactly how somebody moves through the escape room, and you'd actually get like a log, like basically a whole trace of what somebody did. And then you could start to, build out some cool visualizations of like pass fail, or like how long does it take people to get through an average room, and like what, is there a pace that you're on? Like all that stuff could be really interesting. So lots and lots of ways to integrate these tools. And I would say that's actually one of the things that I like to practice. And I think one of the strengths we've had as Code TV is being able to not just have an idea, but like have an idea in a way that we can be flexible at how we bring sponsors in. Like what are the different ways that somebody could be part of this? And like when you look at a tool, start getting creative about how that tool could be used. How could we like use or misuse this tool in a creative way that would allow us to play a game with it? And that's like, so for example, when we did Leet Heat or Dev Squares, we needed multi-screen software. And so Convex was a really good partner for this because they have the real time. And a real-time update that we can send to the, the host has got a phone, and that is holding like the current question and whose turn it is and other details that allow them to sort of, run the show. We've got the big screen that's showing the current question. We've got the screens on the podiums that are showing each player's name and score. We've got the producer view, which is sort of where you're able to like control the show. And each of those screens needs to be derived from the same source of truth. And like Convex is really good at this. So we've got real-time updates. We're able to build all these different things as like web pages and UIs. And all of those are being updated in real time as either the host or the producer is interacting with their screen and marking things as correct, incorrect, setting whose turn it is, and all that kind of stuff, right? So this is I think, like, to me, this is actually like the fun part of sales, is trying to think through how to integrate stuff and, like get creative with applications of these things, because all of them then become these really interesting open source, like reference implementations. Like, oh, you want to see how to run a multi-screen kiosk? Because that, the thing we built for Elite Heat could also absolutely be like an order screen, right? Like the host screen could be used as like active orders. The producer screen could be the person at the register punching in what people want. The score screens could be like which orders are in the queue and which orders are ready for pickup. Like, there's so many interesting ways, and the functional difference there is fairly negligible, right? The concept is just showing you, hey, here's how you can use this tool to create a multi-screen real-time updating piece. And so for the sponsor, hopefully they see that and they go, oh yeah, this is a great way for us to get like a pretty in-depth reference implementation. It's a way for us to do something that's notable that people will talk about. It's a way to get people to hopefully look at the source code and figure out how this thing was built, maybe, try this stuff and play with it. And it's all, and that's beyond the brand awareness that they get from something that will get watched, assuming things go well, significantly more than the average video, like company channel video, will get watched. And so, that's the game, is how do we line up, like stack up these little pieces of value to the point that when a sponsor hears about the project, it's just a no-brainer. Like, of course we're going to sponsor this because I can't think of a better way to spend this money. That's easier when you've got a trail of, like Web Dev Challenge, where we're now booking for season 3. And I'm not overcoming objections of like, is this going to work? Like, people just look at the YouTube and they go, oh yeah, it's going to work. So it's just a question of like, do we have that much money available for marketing? And they have to weigh it against like, okay, do we want to do this, or do we want to be the platinum sponsor at some conference? And then based on their priorities, they make a yes, no call. I'm not in calls like in the first season of Web Dev Challenge. A lot of my calls were like, okay, but what is this? And then how does it work? And then what happens? Like, what if people don't watch it? What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? It's very different now. And that's because there's like an established pattern. People can see the work and they can reference past work. That's not true with some of these big ideas that I've been chasing for years now. They don't have prior art. There's no reference material. I can't point at something and say, it's that. It's like, okay, all right, let me go full conspiracy board here, and like I'm going to start whiteboarding about all this stuff, and here's the million ideas and different ways they can connect. And you can see sort of how we've been able to succeed with this sort of thing in the past if you look at the other shows we've made, but we've never made anything like this. We want you to be the first one. And it's so hard. It's so hard because it triggers every like risk aversion thing that somebody has. And that's just a very challenging place to be, because I fully understand, like, if somebody came to me that I didn't know very well, even if they had an impressive resume, like, I've never worked with this person before. How can I trust that they're not terrible? How can I trust that they were actually the ones who did all this work and it wasn't like a group project where they just showed up and got credit? Like, there's so many question marks if you've never worked with somebody before. So yeah, I think that's a whole thing. What's the smallest version of this? I think so. Like, the smallest version of this is there was a conversation actually in the supporters only channel about there's a game called Keep Talking and No One Explodes. And I was thinking about this as a potential like cheap implementation and cheap-ish implementation. And the thought is, if we were to set up a two-sided wall, and that wall could have a combination of like lockers and screens and keypads and et cetera, then what we could potentially do is have people on, like, one person on either side of the wall, and they would kind of play a team puzzle game. And each time one of them gets a clue, it's a clue for the other person. So they have to kind of shout through the wall and explain the clue to the next person, so they can't see things, but they have instructions, and then the other person has to, like, interpret those instructions and figure out what they mean based on the wall, um, which would allow them to then unlock the next clue. And I think that could be a combination of, like, you go in there, you plug in your computer, and that gives you some you get like an interface that you can maybe you can write some custom code and, like, send that against an endpoint, and that endpoint is maybe a Raspberry Pi that's installed in the wall that you're trying to get it, you're trying to get it to the right payload. But in order to do that, you have to figure out what the payload is, and to get that, you need to collaborate with your partner and, like, shout these instructions back and forth. So the general idea would be, like, you're trying to solve a multi-phase puzzle. And I think Keep Talking and No One Explodes is I've actually never played the game. It's one of the ones that's been on my list. But if I remember correctly, the premise is a similar thing. Like, one of you has the manual for defusing a bomb, and the other one has the bomb, and you have to kind of, like, shout at each other to walk through the act of disarming the bomb before the timer runs out. So my hunch is that we'd be able to do this as a single wall, like, double-sided, but it would be a limited version of this. It would be cheaper to build. It would be I don't know if it would be more or less complicated from a software standpoint. Do you need something? No? She literally just came over and took my wallet. But so I have no idea what you're doing. Sure. I don't remember what I was talking about. Anyway, but yes, yeah, the idea is to scope it down, and, like, that potentially could be something that we could build with, like, Code TV funds and not need a sponsor at all. But it'd be more fun with a sponsor. You know what I mean? Let's see. Oh, you're currently working on a workflow and orchestration tool. That's awesome. 3D printer sponsorship. Yes, I think that would be a very real thing. But continuous live stream of all Code TV shows on a big loop, like a real TV channel. Oh, that would be kind of fun. Yes, that was my wife Marissa taking my wallet. But yeah, so we're throwing a party, and the party's going to be at the studio, and somebody just delivered something, so she was coming to take tip money. Anyways, speaking of hanging out, if anybody's in the Portland area, we are doing a Food with Friends tonight. And I'm going to grab the link to that, in fact, because I should also share that on social media and let people know that it's happening. So if you are in the Portland area today and watching this live, you should come hang out. Drop a note in. Send a note in the Discord, and then I'm also going to drop a quick note on social media while I'm thinking about it, because I will 100% forget if I don't. Man, I wish that Ad Event didn't put their own ad on a thing that you share. That's a real bummer. Just don't mind me while I tweet instead of talking to people on my stream. Yeah. So where are we at? What are we talking about? Let me get back over to the window here. Relay race style challenge. That's kind of a fun idea. I feel like and this is sort of the fun of this stuff is I have this notebook that's sort of half formed formats. And so we've got stuff that kind of mimics, like, there's this, I forget what they're called. There's this kind of global game of tag that this group plays on YouTube. And they've got a system of rules, and somebody is like trying to get to a city. They can only use certain methods of transportation, and they have a limited amount of time to do it. And the other team is required to catch them. And it's very, like, it's a super fun format. If anybody remembers the name of that, drop it in the comments. Um, Jet Lag the Game, that is the one. So Jet Lag the Game is great. It's a super fun game. And I've been thinking, like, what would happen if we tried a version of something kind of like that for web dev, for Code TV? Like, what would it be? What would it mean? And I don't have a good answer, but I have like a handful of ideas thrown together in a notebook that's like, hey, we could do something kind of like this. And maybe the way that it would work is, it could be a kind of relay race sort of thing. It could be we want a handful of teams to like get around to a group of different tech cities and like meet up with different folks there. There's so many ways that we could do it that would be really fun. Or it could even be something like you're trying to get a certain piece of tech to run, but like we didn't give you any of the required pieces, and you have to slowly put them together. And then, the other team is trying to figure out what you're building before you get it built. Kind of like there's so many ways that you could sort of take these formats and tweak them and try to figure out what they are. But like, I've thought about, what if we worked with a feature flagging company and did something like a very aggressive game of capture the flag, where two teams set flags inside of their app, and if you can figure out what their naming convention is, and it'd be, we could structure it in a lot of ways. Like they had to hide clues, or maybe it's a game of 20 questions where like you can only give yes or no answers, but you have to answer truthfully, kind of thing, like kind of like Battleship, like, B4. And like once you figure out where a ship is, you're kind of able to like deduct where the rest of it is so that you can sink the battleship. I think this would be a similar sort of concept where you would maybe like you'd choose like, my feature flag naming convention is players on the 1992 San Francisco 49ers, right? And so if somebody can figure that out, then it suddenly becomes really easy for them to guess and flip all of your feature flags, but they'd have to figure that out first. And so that would sort of be like, that could be the structure of the game is you can go find clues on the website, or once you get your first flag, you have to kind of feel like, what is the category of this? Like you kind of have to make some guesses, but a lot of fun ways to do that sort of thing. And if the first person to flip everybody's feature flags wins. And that there was a conversation going for a little while with a company that does feature flags, where there was like, well, and what if it at the same time you were also playing capture the flag for real, which introduces a lot of like liability waivers and stuff, but could be really, really fun. Scrapyard Wars. I don't know Scrapyard Wars. Let me pull up this comment so people know what I'm referring to. Scrapyard Wars. Going undercover to buy PC. What is that? Okay, Scrapyard Wars. Where's the description of this? Do they not have just like a, what is it? Well, I'm gonna do a link to this, but I'll have to watch it later because I don't know what it is. But yeah, then like I've been kicking around. There's like also so many fun games that we could play. Like I really want to get a game together that has anybody seen The Chase? The Chase is a game show where it's trivia, but there's this guy they call the Beast. It's a very like American style show where it's very dramatic and everything. But and I think it's based off another game that was in the UK, but I haven't seen the original UK version. I stumbled across the US version and watched an episode or two. But the premise of it is that you've got these people who are going to compete in trivia, but they have to do it against the Beast, and they start with like a 3-answer head start. And every time you get a question right, you move one space closer to the goal. but the beast is also moving closer to the goal. And so if you miss a question, he gets one space closer. So basically you get to miss 3 questions before you get caught and you're out. And obviously, like if the beast missed a question, that also is very beneficial for you. But I thought it would be super fun. Like we've got all these tools claiming that they can replace developers. Like, what if we had a game show that was like basically the chase, but the idea was that we would be giving you tasks as a developer, and then you would have, quote unquote, the operator, who would be somebody who's really good at like leveraging AI coding tools, and they're going to do the same tasks. But their restriction is they have to one-shot their prompt, right? So it would always be something reasonably straightforward. Like we're not gonna have the time to do like really, really in-depth things, but like it'd be kind of interesting to see if we could give a group of developers like different front-end challenges. Like you're going to write a reducer. You're going to write a CSS rule to lay out these things in a grid. You're going to write the valid, like a semantically accessible form input. All these little tasks that are, if you're a practiced web dev, you've probably done them before. They might be something that you have to Google, so it could be really challenging. But also, it's the sort of stuff that like you would expect an AI to do really, really well, but it honestly might not, because it might be only capable of writing Tailwind, or it might try to write the whole form in React and it's actually just spitting out a bunch of divs. Like there's a lot of bad training data out there. So the operator is going to be under the constraint of like, how do you get this thing to do things in the way they are described, and not just like, here's a vague description of what I want, make me whatever code you want. I think that to me would be a really fun game, and would be interesting. Like and my hunch is that it would probably be reasonably evenly matched, because I think that a skilled dev using AI is probably going to be pretty effective. And I think a skilled dev not using AI is probably going to outperform AI on some of the things that are more like semantic and not like the common things. Like it seems like AI tends to do React and Tailwind. So like in a React and Tailwind challenge, operator is going to smoke people. But when you get into like, hey, maybe write a web component, who can do that? Great question. Can anybody write a web component without Googling it? Who's to say? Could be impossible. Legends foretell that the one who can do that is actually crowned the king of Camelot. Let's see. Okay, so Scrapyard Wars, teams build computers with only use and free cycled parts. So imagine teams, secondhand IoT parts. And so I really want to get more IoT involved. One of the things I was thinking about is like, I kind of like the idea of even if the IoT isn't particularly necessary, I like it as a way to make the game more visual. So for example, I was thinking of like, if the challenge was, for example, you had to you get like an endpoint, and you have to figure out what payload that endpoint expects to return a successful response. That's the challenge. Now that could be done in a million different ways, but the actual like submission is kind of anticlimactic, right? Because you're like, once you write the code, you would just save and then reload your browser, and that would make you'd get a pass fail. Kind of anticlimactic, right? So how much fun would it be if instead of just refreshing the browser and seeing what happens, you loaded it onto a USB drive, but that USB drive is like in a 3D printed whatever, like a key or a sword or something, and you have to like take that to a podium and like put it in like you're placing the idol on the Forbidden Temple altar or something. And then once it gets connected, the program that's connecting it would say, oh, this is a USB drive, look for this file, execute this function. And that would just be like, we can make these sorts of things happen. And that would execute it to decide whether or not your API key worked. Is that necessary? Absolutely not. Is it very fun? Yeah. right? It would be fun to design. It would be fun to build. I think it would be way more fun to watch because it's sort of like as you're, you have to, I guess, like assemble the pieces of these things. You have to plug it into your station while you work. And then once you're done, you like power up your key. Then you got to go take your key to the spot and you would like drop it in. And then you would, we could do a little delay or whatever and have the thing pulse and beep and, smoke or whatever we want. And then we get a success fail message, or you don't get a success fail message. Like maybe you drop into a foam pit if you're wrong, and maybe the door opens and you get the prize if you're right. Like there's so many ways that you could scale this stuff up and down playing with the IoT. Obviously, like actually building IoT would be very fun as well. My thoughts obviously immediately go toward just, I don't have a lot of contacts in the IoT world. So if anybody does and wants to introduce me, then we could go play. I think that would be really, really fun. So let's see. See a web dev challenge where one of the teams is non-devs just using AI. So I'm actually thinking, I think I might change the rules for Web Dev Challenge Season 3. I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to restrict people from using AI, but I'm going to require them to explain their code. So that would preclude a non-developer from using AI. However, I have several things coming up that won't be Web Dev Challenge, but will be that competition reality kind of stuff, where I actually think that would make a lot of sense. And honestly, I really do like the idea of doing this stuff for real. Like if I had the budget, I would do an arced season where we would follow teams for, I don't know, 6 or 8 episodes. And the goal would be you're going to start on day 1 by starting a project, and you're actually going to work on it through the whole series, because I want to get beyond, like, especially in the age of AI, you can get to a demo really fast. I can say, make me an app that looks and acts like Linear, and you get something that's pretty close. And on early inspection, it demos really well. It looks like Linear, and you click on stuff and it does what Linear does. And that's really interesting. However, if I could then in episode 2 say, okay, we've pivoted. Linear is now a photo sharing app. Make that happen. How well can somebody maintain, like change, alter, expand their AI generated apps? I think it's possible, but I don't think it's as like turnkey as, one-shotting a prompt that says, make me something that looks like Trello. So I think it starts to become much more interesting. And it also creates this world where, like, we could really start to see in practical terms how these tools speed us up and how these tools slow us down. Like, what are the actual trade-offs, not just what's marketing hype and who hates AI and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think I want to see more realistic scenarios, because I've seen a lot of magic demos. I really dislike the magic demos because in my mind, if you can't create a reproducible demo, it's not a demo. It's vaporware. Because if I see you do a thing and I open up my laptop and I go to your website and I do the exact same thing that you did and it doesn't work because your demo skipped a few things that had to be done in order to get the outcome that you got, that's not a demo. That is a sales deck, right? And that's very different. And developers do not like it when things don't work as expected. It's a very easy way to lose a lot of trust. And I think a lot of our mistrust of AI tooling is because a lot of the demos say, just write a prompt, and then you go do it, and it doesn't look anything like what you saw the demo do, because in the demo, they spent a few rounds of like iterating on it. This is something I actually really respect, the way that the Goose team, so Rizal Scarlett is very visible on this, and Angie Jones is leading that team. Their approach is like, show it warts and all. So they demo live. They don't do canned demos, and things do go wrong. Like, as they're working, you'll see things that like don't come out right. And then instead of being like, oh, well, that didn't work, they actually make it part of the demo to, okay, so that didn't do what we wanted. How are we going to fix it? And then they go through like tweaking Goose to get it to do the thing they wanted and get the outcome. So now it's a very reproducible demo. I, as a developer, can go do what Rizal did, and I know it's non-deterministic, but I can see the way that like the first prompt gets kind of close, and then you see the things that are wrong, and so you got to like tweak things, and then you got to get it to roll something back and try again. And that practice of how to actually use these tools, one, gets out of this magical marketing where you're saying, look, it's perfect. It's clearly not. We know they're not. We've all tried these tools. They don't get it right on the first try, and that's not a problem. Very few things work on the first try. We're used to working a little bit for a good outcome, but don't lie to us and pretend that it's not. Right? Like you have to be really honest when you're marketing to developers, because we're literally going to try the thing. We're going to use it. If you say it works and it doesn't, we don't trust you anymore. Like, congratulations, you burned your bridge. And so that's why I really want to see more of these practical examples, is like, if a tool is out there blowing smoke saying, yeah, one shot your way to anything, you can build anything you want. You don't need developers anymore. Great. Let's get a non-developer on here. Let's have them build something. Let's give them real world requirements and let's see it go. And if they can do it, high five, congratulations, you built a great product. And if they can't, that's also fine. But let's be real about what these things are, right? And I think it would be so fascinating to have a team of devs with no AI, a team of devs that's using Claude Code or VS Code with Copilot, a team of devs that's like exclusively in the terminal using like Warp or whatever, and a team of like product managers that's in Cursor, or a team of product managers in Claude Code, or even folks in like Lovable or Bolt or any of those to try it. Like, do the thing. Let's actually start companies here. Let's see what a team can do when they use these tools as advertised. Like, can they actually get to the outcomes that are being advertised? I want that to exist. I think that's such an interesting thing. So yeah, it's a really, there's a lot of potential in it. The problem is when you get to story arcs, anything episodic, like if it's arced, gets much more expensive, which requires either a lot of sponsors, which is really difficult to coordinate because timing almost never works out, or you need one really big sponsor, which is definitely possible, but it gets less. The pool for that is very small, so you end up pitching like a small number of companies that have the budget for that sort of thing. And you're basically just waiting for them to be at the right place, right time. It doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means it's usually like a multi-year sales cycle. And if some of the things that I've been working on come to fruition, it'll be the culmination of 3 years of like active sales to get one of these big arced things together. So yes, I want it to happen. I think it should happen. I am actively pitching it. I have not yet been able to line up the right sponsor, but I think it would be happen. If you had to hand code a regex pattern to save your life, you just lie down. You want to know my one weird flex? I'm really good at regular expressions. It's like one thing that I feel for some reason my weird brain likes regular expressions, and so I don't use them very often, because I feel like regular expressions, honestly, to me are one of those things that, like, when you get to the point of needing a regular expression, it needs to be because something is deeply weird, right? Like you have a very weird requirement. But I really like writing them. They're really fun to write. Oh yeah, wireless data transfer to hide the fact that it's a USB key. Yeah, we could do NFC. We could do all sorts of stuff. Like, it'd be so much fun. You throw yourself into the foam pit for the hell of it. Can only use ask mode. Like, yeah, like it'd be so much fun. Like, Pivot is a great name, by the way. Next show idea. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, Zed, I have had great conversations with Zed. I think Zed would be a wonderful partner, honestly. Like, I got to have dinner with the Zed team and just, like, loved them. They were so much fun to talk to. So yeah, definitely something that maybe could be possibly that we're talking, and maybe could be possibly that we're gonna do something fun together. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, and this is the sort of thing, is like, I think that we're in an interesting spot, right? Where I think there are a huge amount of tools. I think that everybody's trying to figure out how to talk to developers. I think that we're seeing the marketing shift from we're going to replace developers to we are like the ultimate power up for developers, which is a very positive sign. I think I'm really happy to see that, because to me, that's a shift. It's a shift away from magical thinking and toward practical thinking. Like, it's the idea, like we haven't abstracted code away. We're not there. And I don't think that we will be with the current wave of LLMs. They're not They're not a thing. Zed got me fed. That is true. Where can you actually buy Dino Nuggies is such a good question. So what we ended up using were the store-bought Dino Nuggies, which I know, ruining the illusion for everybody. But they had, where did they do Dino dot? Yeah, here it is, Dino Nuggies. They did in fact make a whole website for this. And I don't know if you can still get them. I hope you can. You could get stickers that were designed by, I believe, Joe Frank, and they are incredible. You should get one if you can. Let's see. Can you get? You can request Dino Nuggie stickers by getting in touch with your pals at Dino. Yeah, you can go talk to the Dino team and tell them you want some Dino Nuggies. And tell them you miss Heat, because I want to do a season 2. Me and Mark have been talking. We got some ideas. But yeah, I think like getting back to the overarching theme of like, the what I think the hardest thing about hard things is it's like trying not to get grumpy or disillusioned when you have a vision for what something could be and aren't able to get people on board. Because I think like this is maybe the growing up part that I've been trying to do, because it's really easy, I think, and like I've legitimately quit jobs over this, where I had something that I thought was important, and I did everything in my power to articulate it, to explain it clearly, to make the slide decks, to make the presentations, to build the educational content, to go on the internal like lunch and learn tour, everything in my power to raise awareness about this thing, show people why the thing I was doing was better, and then encourage them to make the switch. And in some cases I was successful, and in a lot of cases I wasn't, and I would just hit the wall, and it was like I just could not figure out why, and it was so frustrating, and I would get so mad, and I would just assume that it was because, and this is, 20 something year old me being like, "Oh, man, why is everybody so fucking dumb? Like, why don't people see how obvious this is?" And you get like mad, you get frustrated. You're like, I could just, like, if everybody would just listen to me, this would work. And then it would just exist, and we wouldn't have to keep having these meetings. And it's so easy to fall into that trap. But and this is the challenge, is like, it's not just about whether or not the idea is good. It's about the timing of the idea. It's about how much of a backlog everybody has. It's about how many times they've been burned by similar ideas that didn't work in the past. And, for example, when I was at IBM, I was the exact caricature of every single hotshot dude that had come through, pitched a big rebuild, tossed it on everybody's lap, and then bounced. And I ultimately ended up being exactly that. I lasted about 2 years at IBM. I came in, I rolled out a big system change. I got frustrated because people wouldn't adopt it, and I bounced. And so all the people who didn't want to adopt my thing because they assumed I was some young hotshot with a big idea who wasn't going to stick around, they were proven absolutely right. So it is important, I think, to understand where people are coming from and why they are resistant to an idea, or even if they are resistant, or if it's just a timing thing, right? Because there's a huge difference between I don't want to do this and I want to do this, but not right now. And there's another, the secret third thing there is somebody saying like, well, I think I want to do this, but I'm worried about what could go wrong for me personally if I were to take this on. And so, there are some ways that you can control this stuff. Like when I was at Netlify, I remember there was this project. I think this was one of my proudest moments at Netlify. Is I took the VP of developer experience role, and right out of the gate, we had some ideas. Or like I took over the docs team as part of that. They sat on the developer experience team. And I remember having, my first round of meetings talking to them about like, what are your biggest pain points? And one of the things they mentioned was like, we can't get any help updating our website. And so the doc site had just sort of languished. It was, it was out of date. It was on an old version of the platform. It was a markdown thing. It was, there was just a lot of things that made it challenging to update. But when I started digging in, I'd go hit the different teams and I'd say like, hey, how come, what do we need to do to get something on your backlog to like fix some of these like really glaring issues with our docs? And the teams were all like, oh yeah, we can handle that. We can handle that. But it would sit on the backlog and it wouldn't get touched. And so I started digging in. I was like, what's going on? And I found out that there was a completely different design system at play in the docs. Like they had different colors, they had different tokens, like everything about it was very bespoke. So it wasn't like somebody could just jump over and make a quick change and then bounce back to their day-to-day work. It was like entering a completely different company. The framework was different, the CSS was all different, the components were all like everything about it was this sort of bespoke external thing. And so I started digging on that and I was like, well, what's going on? How come we haven't fixed this? And I talked to by this time I had taken over the marketing team as well. So the web team reported to me. I was like, what's going on? Like, what's the challenge here? And they said, well, it is also like, we want to fix this, but it's a huge lift and we can't get it prioritized. And, they were saying like, we want to consolidate the token library. We want to fix all the colors. And like, I don't know if anybody remembers Netlify around like 2020, but there were three very distinct looks on Netlify. There was the marketing site, there was the app, and there were the doc site. Those three websites looked like three different companies. The colors were slightly different. The typography was completely different. Like they weren't conjoined at all. There was no brand consistency whatsoever outside of the logo. And basically the reason for that was that three different teams had owned each of these builds. They weren't coordinated because, it was a startup. Like they didn't have time to do that sort of thing. So each of them built their own thing. And over time, things just drifted. Like they started on the same colors, but then there was a marketing brand refresh and that caused a slight tweak to the like official Netlify teal because it didn't have sufficient contrast for whatever. And then the app was like drifted out of date. And then the app eventually got like tweaked a little bit. That caused it to drift further. We got an official font, but only the marketing team had installed it. And so just like over time, this whole thing had sort of fallen apart and it was no longer like a shared system. It was three separate companies, basically. There was the app team, there was the marketing team, there was the docs team, and all three of them were responsible for maintaining their own web properties, which were effectively nothing to do with each other. So as I started to dig a little bit further, I was like, okay, well, why don't we just prioritize? It's like, well, we can't because we need, we don't control all of the things that need to be updated. So like we would have to touch engineering's code and we've talked to them about it before. And it's just such a big lift that like, we wouldn't be able to do it. And there's a lot of risk that if we got it wrong, we would slow engineering down and that would be a huge problem. I said, okay, well, who do you need from engineering to fix that? And they, I started figuring out that there was like, we needed the docs team. We needed folks from the marketing team. We needed folks from the product marketing org. We needed folks from the engineering team and like a couple folks from engineering leadership who could make like rapid approval decisions. It ended up being 12 to 14 people, I think. Super cross-functional. It was, across sales and marketing and engineering and developer experience, like the whole company. And so I remember just I was like, but it's not that much work. It's more like coordination, right? And we sort of realized that the biggest pain point was the colors and the typography and the core of everything had drifted. So if we could get to a shared set of design tokens, that was the lift. If we could get to a shared set of design tokens, it would unify the basics of the brand in a way that would immediately cause more cohesion between the three sites. So I was like, okay. And I kind of back channeled with the different people who'd be doing the work. And I was like, listen, if I get you a week to focus on this with the required stakeholders, can we get this done? And they said, if you give me a week, I can get this done. I said, okay, great. I'm going to make it happen. And so I went to the leadership team and I said, I need these people. I want to bring them all to one place and I'm going to fix this in 5 days. And I need each of you to buy in and just give this list of people permission to only focus on this for 5 days. And I'm going to clear up this pain point that we've had for a year, maybe more. And the thing that happened was like everybody wanted to fix it, but nobody wanted to be responsible for the potential failure of it. And so I was willing to like lay myself down as the bearer of all responsibility. I was like, I believe, like, I've talked to everybody involved. I am extremely confident that we can get this done. And if I'm wrong, it's on me, right? I'm not trying to spread blame around. I'm not trying to get anybody to take responsibility for this. I'm saying if you give me 5 days, this will be done. And if I'm wrong, you can kick my ass. And because they knew where responsibility would ultimately lie, they were willing to give me that shot. And we did this thing, we called it Web Cohesion Week. It was one of the most like rewarding work things that I think I've ever done, because it was this huge cross-functional effort. We had so many people involved. Each one of them showed up. They all worked well together. We had like different teams sitting with each other, and they all were able to do this incredible thing in 5 days. And in 5 days, we fixed we didn't fix it permanently, right? It wasn't like, oh, we'll never have to look at this again. But we sorted out that design system problem, and we got it so that when you go to the different Netlify sites, they look like the same company. It was this immediate like quality upgrade where everything felt like it was part of the same company, and it all felt like the modern version of our branding. And so once I got that done, I didn't do anything, right? Like I did not work on the fix. I just was there to clear space and to absorb blame. And I think that made it possible for all of these people who needed to do the work. Suddenly they had permission to do the thing they wanted to do because they knew it wasn't going to be their fault if it went wrong. And if you're in a leadership position at a company, you're in a position to do that. If you are a consultant like I am, when Code TV comes in to help a company, I can't do that. You can't say it's my fault, because ultimately, like, sure, it's my fault, but the leader or the product manager or the marketing leader or whoever it is that brings me in and has Code TV do a project, they're the ones that sign the check, and they have to be willing to accept that responsibility. And sometimes they can't, not everybody has the political capital inside of an organization to put their job on the line. And depending on what the politics are inside of the company, the suggestion of doing something that could put their job on the line could be seen as an opening to attack them or try to like weaken their hold over some part of the org in a particularly dysfunctional organization. But the problem is like, you don't know that as the person coming in and trying to sell something. I don't know what a manager's like with their team. I don't know what a given like head of marketing's like, are they respected by leadership, or are they one of those companies where leadership is all engineers and so they treat marketing like a nuisance that they just wish they didn't have to deal with? We don't know. And if I go to a head of marketing who's treated like a nuisance and I say I need a lot of money, then them asking for that could actually weaken their position with leadership, where they're further convinced that head of marketing is just a piece of dead weight on the company, right? I can't influence that. I can't, like, if I get into a company and I realize that the person I'm talking to is just at a super politically disadvantaged place, I can't get mad at them for not taking a risk on me. I'm very sad that they're not in a position where they can take a risk, but like, it would be completely unreasonable for me to blame them for the situation that they're inside of their org. Similarly, I don't know what people's deadlines are. I don't know what the climate inside of the company is. I haven't seen the earnings reports. Like, are they growing like wild? If so, then they're probably going to invest. Are they on their like third down quarter? Probably not going to drop a bunch of money on something like what I'm doing, right? So what's very easy to do is to have an idea that you feel is objectively correct. And then when you talk to a room full of people, if they don't understand it, you can get really frustrated and say like, how do these idiots not see how clearly excellent this is? The hard thing to do is to look at it and say, okay, what about this was feedback about my idea? And what about it is circumstances beyond my control? And if the feedback is we don't get it, or it's hard for us to justify this on the reported ROI that you're estimating, that's feedback for me, right? They didn't see the value. I need to go back and refine what I'm doing. But if the feedback is, we love this, we need to think about it, it's probably going to be a next quarter thing, or, let's revisit this in, after we get our budgets in Q1. That's not really feedback for me. I can't force them to do anything. Circumstantially, they are in a position where they don't feel like this is the right time. And it doesn't matter whether or not I think I'm right. What matters is whether they feel like it's the right time to do it, even if they like, because again, a lot of times it's not a matter of wanting to, it's a matter of capability. We don't have bandwidth, we don't have budget, we don't have time. One of those things is almost always the blocker when you get to an idea that is good. And then, there's also a bunch of stuff that you can't control, like do they trust you? And if they're in a high trust org, they're maybe more willing to extend some trust. Or if they know somebody that you've worked with and they can get a warm referral, maybe they're more willing to extend some trust. But if they're in a position where like they met you because you were standing next to them at a conference and you got to talking, and now you're asking them for tens of thousands of dollars to do a project, like they have no reason to trust me. They have no reason to believe that I'm going to deliver. I can point to the portfolio, and the longer the portfolio gets, the easier it is for me to build some automatic trust with people when they first meet me. But it's still, I'm asking for a lot. Like if I come into your company and you're used to not spending anything on developer marketing, or you spend very little on developer marketing, and I come in asking for Code TV budgets, yeah, that it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to trust me with. It's a lot. There's potential sticker shock there, and none of those things is feedback on the idea. Every one of those things is a circumstance beyond my control. And if it's something beyond my control, I have to not get frustrated with people for circumstances that I can't affect. And it's very, very hard to not get grumpy and to get disillusioned or to think that the idea is bad, because when you're asking for something huge, the number of circumstances where that thing is viable get really, really narrow, right? And so I'm asking for a company that regularly spends large amounts of money on marketing to trust me, which is a big ask, with a significant part of their marketing campaign for the next quarter, half, year. In order to do that, it needs to be the time that they are planning their campaign. It needs to be a time when they have budget available. It needs to be a time where they're not in the middle of some big push, like going toward their next conference. All of those things need to be true in order for them to even be able to consider this thing. And the number of companies that are in a position to consider this thing is very small. And the number of companies that are in a position that are at the right time where I have a direct line of contact with somebody who can make that decision is extremely small. So for me to get, like, I can't get mad at people if I'm not able to move the idea through. All I can do is work on, can I get introduced to the people who do control those budgets? Can I meet more people who have that sort of influence? Can I make this make even more financial sense for a company? Can I tie more value to it? Can I figure out ways to spend the same marketing dollars multiple ways as part of the project, and see how we can extend the, can I try to, like, basically sweeten the deal, make it easier and easier? And while I'm trying to do that, how can I build more and more reference implementations? Like, can I build more stuff that now I go back and I say, hey, since the last time we talked, here's a few more things that I've shipped. And you can look at it and see, man, Code TV's cooking. They're dropping a lot of stuff. And we've been talking to them. And since we've been talking to them, they've done these things. So clearly they are able to deliver. Like, these are the sorts of things that you just can't rush this stuff, right? And it's frustrating, because I would love, if I could go back in time and I could, like, bop somebody on the head and say, like, listen, I have, guaranteed knowledge from the future on what I'm capable of accomplishing. If you give me this much money right now, I know what I could have accomplished. I also know that if I would have gotten too much money early on, I would have spent it on stuff that wouldn't have made sense, because I didn't have the experience to know what was worth it and what wasn't, right? And so these are the sorts of things that I think you also just have to embrace, that, like, if you're taking a big swing, it needs to be a swing that's within the realm of, like, reasonable next steps. And I'm actually kind of grateful in retrospect. I was very not grateful for it at the time, that I had to do the season 0 of Web Dev Challenge, which was the full remote version. Because if I hadn't done that, I don't think the season 1 pilot would have been as good, because I think I would have been going in without any reps on the specifics of the format, or, like, what did and didn't seem to play well, like what people were willing to build, what they had trouble building. I got some practice in that V0, and it made a big difference in what I was able to do right out of the gate when we started filming in person. And I think I would have suffered if I hadn't done that. And I also think if somebody would just immediately handed me $1 million and said, "Go make a full arc season," I'm reasonably confident now that I would have crashed and burned, because it's too much. There's too many moving parts, and I didn't have any systems in place. So I would have been running absolutely blind into a whole bunch of areas that I'd never been in before. Now, we've made dozens of episodes of Web Dev Challenge. So moving into an arced version isn't like, it's a reasonable next step. So it's the sort of thing that we can do with marginal increased. There are very few unknowns, right? Whereas if we would have done that as the first step, there would have been way too many unknowns. But yeah. Oh, what's up, C Sharp Fritz? Thank you for the raid. Welcome in, everybody. Yeah, I'm on a full tangent. What are we even talking about out here? Let me go through let's see. Lift to visible value is, yes, I think this is a truly challenging thing. A lot of red tape to getting modern web solutions implemented, and you want to move fast, but there are lots of layers that have to be moved through. This is like the forever problem, because if you move too slow, by the time you get one thing fixed, everything else is out of date, right? And so, but I think this sort of becomes the game. And I think this is where I find sales becomes a puzzle that can be fun. Because if you start thinking about it this way, it's less about like, do people like me enough to give me money, or like, can I trick somebody into believing me or whatever? And it becomes more about like, everybody's got a set of motivations, and all of our motivations are basically the same at work. Like, we all want to ship something that people like enough to pay for it, because if we increase the revenue of the company, it means we get our stock is worth more, or we get a bonus at the end of the year, or at the bare minimum, we keep our jobs, and like everybody stays employed, and that's great. So knowing that that's like the baseline motivation, you can start to then tease apart, okay, so my department is trying to build the tech side of things, but the sales department is trying to get more people to purchase things. And in order to get people to purchase things, they need features that they can like say, "Hey, we got a new thing. Do you want to come take a demo and see if we want to talk about a contract?" Right? Like, that's why sales is always up in your business saying like, "Oh, we need this thing to get this customer to close." But ultimately what they're saying is they want you to ship faster. Now, for you to ship faster, seems like there's a lot of blockers to you getting stuff out the door, right? So now we're starting to talk about the same thing. Well, we want to ship fast. You want us to ship fast. What if we were able to, I don't know, put 10% of our time into removing blockers to fast delivery, so that sales gets more of what they need in order to get things in front of customers. And now we are able to do this in such a way that over time, our speed of delivery will increase, and we can measure that by whatever. We can measure it by number of features merged. We can measure it by, you can always come up with a metric. But ultimately what you're doing is, you're, instead of saying like, we need time to clean up tech debt, or we need time to modernize the code base, you're saying, if we get some like velocity tuning time, we will be able to, deliver the features you want more quickly. They don't care that it's tech debt. They're not interested in tech debt. What they care about is the fact that when you go into that legacy code base, it takes you 3 extra days because you have to go test all the things that may have been affected by the spaghetti code in there. That sucks, right? If you don't have to spend that 3 days, damn, you're ready to rock, right? So these are the sorts of things that like, it kind of becomes fun then. Like you're starting to play a puzzle. I do agree that like coordination is the real work. Like I've said this before, but I think as you grow in your career, like any steps beyond senior kind of stop being about how much you know as a coder. Like you will obviously learn more about systems and building things, and you'll always be picking up more experience and more skill. But really, once you get beyond senior, like toward the staff principal, et cetera, it's kind of a lot less about what you can build and a lot more about what you can enable. And most of that enablement is making sure that people on your team are all rowing in the same direction, making sure that the people outside of your team understand the value of what you're building so that nobody comes in and rips up your roadmap, making sure that your manager is equipped with the right information and metrics so that they can go defend your team. Like all these things, the plan is scoped properly so that you don't get caught on these tangents that give people an excuse to come in and say, why are you going slow? Like, we don't care about this, build the feature. There's a million things that are hard to do, especially when you get into big enough orgs that like things become cross-functional. If you're working on a front-end team and you got to coordinate with multiple back-end teams, how's your relationship with them? Like, do they want to work with you? Or are they a team that is tough to work with? How do you crack that nut so that they don't block you from getting things done, or so that they are willing to share information or give you a heads up if something's going to change that might touch your code? All those sorts of things they're hard. But they're also the things that really start to build a lot of value, even if you never go into a leadership track, right? You can be an extremely senior IC and have these outsized impacts across the org because you think about how what your team is doing is impacting and will be impacted by the rest of the company. Yeah, if the lift is high and the visible value is low, it's hard to get. Yes, I think that's a huge challenge. Fail in a way that progresses you with forward momentum. That I think is, something that I think about a lot is I don't actually think there's any way to fail if what you did is trying something that gives you new information, right? Like, because at the very least, you've received information about what to do differently next time. Generally speaking, you don't want that to be the only value you get out of projects most of the time, but like it helps reframe that sometimes you really are just sitting in a dark room and you have no idea what to do. And if you sit there and think or plan, there's nothing to plan for. You're sitting in the middle of the dark room. There's no visible landmarks. There's no indication of what direction you want to go. You could sit there and plan forever and you'll never get any additional information or make any progress. The only thing you can do is take a step forward and see if you can find a door or a window or a light switch, something that helps you make sense of where you are. And that sometimes requires you to just take a wild guess. And the wild guess should be contained. It should have a clear, like, what are we trying? How are we controlling damage? What happens if we're wrong and we need to roll back? Like, always be ready to have a recovery plan and to make sure that the thing you're doing has, perceive like a hypothesis and a recovery plan. I think those are very important. But like, if you just walk out there and try something, infinitely more valuable than sitting and planning with no information, because you get into what I've always joked is the equivalent of like business D&D, where you're building hypotheses on hypotheses. And you're like, okay, so if I build this, then the customers love it. Then we would build this, and then the customers would want that. And so then we would need this thing. And suddenly you're like 3, 4, 5 layers of hypotheses deep, which is like, it's just exploding complexity. There's zero chance that is going to be what actually happens. You're just sort of having a little fantasy role play about what might happen in your business. So the only way to get information is to do something. And so, ideally you have some information. Maybe you've got some research, you've got some feedback from your users, you've got something that makes it pretty clear, like this is a next step that we know provides value. But if you don't, try something, figure out how you're going to measure it, and then use that information to inform your next step, right? I love, like, going back to the idea of like Web Cohesion Week. I think the value of those sorts of things is like so far beyond just the ostensible task at hand. Like, it was so valuable for us to fix that design token system, right? But it also got the design teams across these three teams to like, they started talking to each other more. They were joking with each other. They were more friendly. They didn't feel like they couldn't reach out to each other for help or, to touch each other's code and the stuff that was like, they were very kind of like, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. Now they were like, well, these are my friends. I can talk to them. I think that it helped prove that cross-functional stuff in the company was possible, which sort of knocked down some walls that had previously been up. And it also, I think, just like built this great sense of camaraderie and momentum. Like we did this thing and we did it so fast and we did it together and we got a result that we'd been telling ourselves was impossible. Like we'd been putting off that work for years and saying like, it sucks so bad, but we just don't have time. We'll never have time to fix that. And we just fixed it. Right. And so the whole company gets this shot of adrenaline of like, dang, look at that. We did that. We can do stuff like that. And so I really love, the like companies will do internal hack weeks or they'll do, you get your Fridays to yourself to do whatever you want. I think, there's better and worse ways to do it. And my personal opinion is like, I really like bringing people into the same place. I'm not, I'm not against remote work, but God, do I love in-person collaboration. I mean, Code TV is built around bringing people together. And so, I'm not RTO, but I'm very pro face to face. And so I'm kind of always looking for excuses like, well, we were going to do a company all hands anyways. Let's extend it by 3 days and just have people do a little hack. Build some stuff, work with each other, work with people off different teams, come up with some things that, like little pain points that we've talked about in the company, your little frustrations that you've always wanted to fix, or like some piece of infrastructure that is outdated that nobody's ever going to prioritize. Just go do stuff, like build a thing. And you get these little shots of adrenaline where people are able to demo this thing that as soon as everybody sees it, they go, oh, why that sucked for so long. I'm so glad you did that. And everybody suddenly feels like they're able to contribute directly to the company because you don't need to drive a whole strategy up to the CEO and back down. You can just take these 4 days where you've been given permission to fix something that frustrates you about the product. You build it, you ship it, you demo it, and assuming it meets, like, obviously we still have standards, we're not just doing whatever we want, but like if it meets the company's quality guidelines, it goes live. You've meaningfully contributed to the quality of your product, and that's like a meaningful, I think, it really, I think, has so much value beyond just what it says on the tin. Like as developers, we really want to be part of something, and as team members, we want to know that we're contributing to the company we're in, and we want to do it with people that we feel like we can talk to and collaborate with, right? Like I don't think that you need to be friends with your coworkers, but I do think you should be friendly with your coworkers and feel like you can talk to them and have a conversation and run ideas by them, build stuff with them. Like all that stuff is so valuable. Um, let's see, take a cynical or advantageous approach. What is content you can make that would help us get hired in decision-making positions to get you money? No, but I mean, I've talked about this before on like how important it is to look at networking as a long game, because everybody who's in this chat, who's been in here for a long time, like we have all built relationships. We know each other either through the Code TV Discord or because we knew each other on Twitter or from hanging out in these chats. Each of us is making different relationships with different people. And everybody here has a career that is at a various stage of growth. So some of us, like I've been in the game for over 20 years now. I've been in leadership positions. I have a pretty big network. Others are fresh out of boot camp looking for their first job or fresh out of college. Others are mid-career, making their switch from like one industry to another. Each of us is in different places, but like, where are we all going to be in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, right? Most of us are still going to be working in some capacity, right? Like I've got another 20, 25 years of my career left. So what am I going to be doing? Who knows? What are y'all going to be doing in another 20 years? My hunch is you'll be doing something really cool because you're putting the work in, right? And so through the act of staying an active member of a community, of being part of this group of like loosely or tightly connected people, we all have connections, and everybody's set of connections it's going to get better. It's like if you think about it, think about it in the most utilitarian way, like investing in index funds, right? Over time, they will improve. And it's so vanishingly rare that you meet somebody and 5 years later, they're not doing better than they were before, right? Like everybody advances in their careers. You learn things, you switch jobs and you get a promotion, you meet somebody who's like got a startup, now you're doing something interesting, you start your own company, you switch industries and now you're doing something cool. Like we all just keep growing. We're all going to keep evolving and we're all going to keep doing new stuff. And the act of being part of this community means that there's a reasonably good chance that somebody who's in this chat today is going to be in a position to influence somebody in the next few years. And that, like, our connection through this may mean that, like, in 3 years, somebody who right now thinks they're just watching me because they want to know how I did what I did is going to be doing something way cooler than I'm doing right now and is somehow going to be able to hire me, right? And I don't know that. I'm not betting on that. But I would bet on that. I would bet that that is going to be the case, and that one of you who currently thinks you have no influence is going to be in a very interesting position of power where you'll be able to, like, pitch me an idea and we'll work together on something, right? Because that's how this industry works. We all grow. And if you stick around long enough and you keep putting in the work, like, you can't help but go up. And so I think a lot of us focus too much on connecting with people who are already in positions of power and forget that careers are long. And, like, the group that you're around now, every one of them is going to advance. And if you are just a cool person who's, like, an active part of a community and supportive and doing your best to help people, there's no way you don't go, that tide will lift you, right? Like, the tide lifts all ships as long as they stick together. Well, thank you very much. I enjoy making the shows. Not sure which one you're referencing, but I do appreciate it. Work on tech debt in December when things slow down for the holidays. That's actually a good strategy because, like, every company I'm talking to has already got a decent number of people out now. And by end of this week, like, people are pretty much gone until January. So if you aren't on vacation, why not tackle some stuff that's been driving you up a wall? You can clear out some tickets that, like, nobody's gonna yell at you for doing that work because nobody was expecting anything else to get done. Regular collaboration is all you asked for from your last company. Yeah, I mean, this is the really hard thing is, like, it's difficult, I think, it's a fine line to walk because, like, I don't think you need to be in the office all the time. And I actually don't think that is the right way to operate. Like, I think people, they need points of contact, like and I think it's different per company. So I'm thinking about when I was at IBM, we were ostensibly 5 days a week in office, and some people did come in 5 days a week, but most of us would come in, like, a few days a week. And what I liked was that it seemed like we were in the same days. And so the whole team was in the same place. Like, this is something that kind of drives me up a wall about modern RTO is that during the pandemic, everybody went remote. Everybody moved all over hell. Companies hired super remotely, which was awesome. And now they're like, well, now you have to go to an office. And so you go to an office to, like, get on a Zoom call with your team in another city. And it's like, what? Why am I here? There's literally no functional difference between me taking this call from my living room and taking this call from the phone booth that I had to fight for. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? But when the team is in the same place, and like, this is going to guide my decision making around as like Code TV grows. I'm going to hire people in Portland because I want to be able to have the team spend some time, not all the time. It won't be full time in office, but I do think it's important 1 or 2 days a week that we're in the same place, because I think that's how companies can make, like, rapid decisions about, especially when they're small. It's how you make rapid decisions about things. Like, you can just say, all right, we got 15 minutes between now and my next thing. Anything on your mind? And you can really quickly just say, like, oh yeah, this thing happened and I don't know what to do about it. Great. Let's talk through it right now. You got a clear idea of what to do next. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to my next thing. You just kind of, like, solve stuff on the fly, and you don't have to formally set meetings for everything. I think you still need, like, you need a mixture of formality and informality. And this is why I like the idea of hybrid, where, you could work 4 days a week from home, but then that 1 day a week is sort of like a collaboration day. We've got a bunch of, like, kind of poorly defined stuff, ideas, brainstorming, general discussion. And through the act of being in proximity with each other, you just start to have those conversations. And it would be difficult to set a meeting that was like, I have a weird feeling. Can we put 30 minutes on the calendar? Right. But I can have a weird feeling and say, like, can I run something weird by you? And somebody just spins their chair around and you go, yeah, let's talk. Right. It's those things are extremely valuable. And I miss them a lot about like working with a team in the same room. Making plans to meet more regularly, I think, is awesome. I feel like that just it's so nice. You're in a spot where you're trapped and no ideas are coming. I mean, so this is I would say I don't know what kind of block you're feeling, but if you're feeling an idea block, walk away from your computer and read some books. Don't do things like scroll social media or watch TV. Like you don't want things that are passive consumption. Do something that's sort of like mentally active, or fully disconnected. Like go take a walk, spend some time with no phone, no computer, just sort of like existing somewhere. Like go meet people for dinner. Go sit in the woods alone. Go pet a dog. Doesn't matter what it is, but disengage your brain from the work and engage it in something else, or force it to fully disengage, like being on a walk. I have found that when I am feeling kind of defeated about, like, I don't know what to do next, I'm feeling overwhelmed. If I spend a couple days reading books, if I spend a couple days, sitting around a fire with some friends in the woods, if I, just honestly, some days just like Marissa and I will go walk to dinner and it's a 30-minute walk. And like the act of walking for 30 minutes is just enough to like kick my brain into gear. And some little spark comes and I'm like, oh, okay. Now that I'm not thinking, now that I'm not like putting all of my energy into thinking about this thing, the subconscious is letting things start to sift and fall into place. And then two dots connect and I go, ooh, what about that? Right. I think that can be really helpful. So you're not putting the work in, you're watching the stream. All right, fair enough. So do jump into the Discord. Like it's good to be here, and there's a lot. What do you think about working so you don't have to work in 20 years? I mean, honestly, that is a whole. There's a lot of different philosophies on this stuff, and I think it's such a deeply personal choice. Like, I know some friends who are really into this. I can't remember what it. I think it's FIRE is the acronym. It's like something retire early. I don't remember exactly what it is, but the idea is like you work really, really, really hard now to build up enough savings or recurring income or investment income so that you're able to live off of your savings and investments for the rest of your life, right? And I think there's plus and minus to some of that stuff. So I've had an experience not of being able to live off of my income for the rest of my life, but where I got what I thought was a dream job that allowed me to work like 6 hours a week, and it paid me 120 grand a year. It was this absolutely, I still can't believe this company was this cool, but they had me on retainer for 10 grand a month to do R&D for them. And a lot of the time they just didn't have anything for me to do, or the thing that they wanted me to do was not very hard. And so they would, they had me working on this, it was like a workshop style presentation app. And what they wanted was something that's super easy now with stuff like Zoom, but this was back in 2014, 2015. They wanted something that would allow them to conduct remote workshops. So it was like a presenter who could talk, and then the ability to break people into breakout rooms. Like Zoom does literally all of this now. But at the time, we were experimenting with like, what would it take to build something like this? So they would give me a task. I would try it. We'd get to a demoable state. And then they said, okay, great, sit tight until next Tuesday when we have our meeting. And then we'll go over next steps. And a lot of times I would have it done by Wednesday. So it's like, cool. So what do you want me to do in the meantime? They said, nothing. And so here I was, I'm suddenly making more money than I'd ever made in my life. And I had nothing to do for most of the week. And I I found that for me, it turned into a really deep existential crisis because I thought that's what I wanted and I had achieved this goal and it just left this gaping vacuum of like, well, then what? Like, why? Um, I think for some folks, they do that because they know that their plan is like, if I can retire by 40, then my kids will be 5 when I do that, and that means that I'll spend all of my time with my kids and whatever. Well, I don't have kids, and I don't have intention to have kids, and I don't really like what would I do with my time, right? And so I would love to be financially secure enough that I didn't have to work, but I think I would still do what I'm doing right now. And I think I would just do it, if I had unlimited money, I would just do it off the money that I had instead of having to get sponsors. Like that would be the game, right? It's like now I can just have an idea and figure out how to make it happen. So sure, yeah, would love that, but functionally, I don't think it would change very much. I think I would spend my time very similarly now if money was not part of the equation. So for me, I like working and not like working, I'm clear, like I'm self-employed. I have a very unique situation. And so I have very carefully built something that is the thing that I would do if I had the freedom to do anything. Um, so I think my short answer is for me personally, I don't want to stop working. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I would love to have the ability to do more of it, and I would love to spend less time trying to get money to be able to do it. Um, but I don't really see a world where I would like stop. Because I'm having fun. Like I really enjoy this, and if I did stop, I would pursue something equally challenging that's just a thing I don't see a path to like make great money with. Like I would love to open a restaurant, but I'm not opening a restaurant until I have enough money that I can just afford to have a restaurant that never makes a dollar, because that seems to be the case with most restaurants, right? And so I think that's sort of that's where I'm at. Uh where we going? What are we doing? What are we doing? What's up, Alex? How you doing? Um got a lot of French. I don't know what I don't French is I'm not good at French. But hello, Henri. How are you? My French, so I spent some time in Paris and I was like, everybody warned me like, oh yeah, the Parisians are so rude, they're not going to speak to you. And we initially found that to be true because I would walk in and I'd say, I'm so sorry, I don't speak French. You speak English, and people would kind of look at me and be like, and then they would just kind of like, like, all right, so let's play sign language, and I'd point to things, and then I would hand them money. But then I was like, okay, well, if people don't speak English, I need to learn French, and so I learned just enough French to be able to like order something, So I would walk into a shop and I would be like, je voudrais un croissant, and they'd be like, please stop. I speak perfect English, and stop murdering my language. We're going to be just fine. So it turns out the secret to getting somebody who speaks French to speak English is to show them that you are so much worse at French than they are at English. What are we doing? Where are we at? What's going on? Yeah, the phone booths are really a bummer. They're some of them are cool, like they've got venting systems and stuff so they don't get all stuffy, but man, some of them are just like little like stale air coffins, vertical coffins. Um Meet up to work together in person for a few days, once or twice per quarter, I think is awesome. Like I really do love that as an approach, and that was what we did at Netlify. The leadership team was kind of silly. They'd meet like every 3 weeks, which I felt was a little excessive. But like the teams, we try to get the teams together at least quarterly. And I didn't want to overdo it because I know that it's also not everybody loves traveling, and putting somebody in a position where they've got a plan to travel every 30 days is, I think, terrible. But like once or twice a quarter, I think is great. And like as needed, right? Like if we're doing something that is, okay, we've been heads down on the same project for the whole quarter, and nothing is changing, and we're not really planning anything soon, like pulling people together is nice, but it doesn't doesn't like serve a purpose. But I loved like a quarterly planning meeting was so good because it was a chance to hang out with the team. You'd get some dinners together. You would do some like workshops and brainstorming sessions. You would kind of run through what the company believed in and like where the direction was from the leadership team, and then sort of set some objectives and then let the team design the programs that would be built to achieve those objectives and outcomes. And it was such a like I always found that to be such a nice way to work. There's like I think a 6 week cool down after people spend time together where the remote work improves. So yeah, I think every 6 weeks is probably the perfect solution, but I would say that is asking a lot of somebody who, has families, et cetera, et cetera. Um, where are we at? I'm Where are we going? What's going on here? I get my best ideas in the shower. Yeah, best ideas in the shower, or like sometimes I'll sit in a coffee shop and I won't have my phone or anything, and I'll just kind of like sit. Um, Financial independence, retire early. That's the FI. Thank you, Kyle and Henri. Um, let's see. You do it because you enjoy it. Yeah, and I think that's it, right? Like and it's not even that it doesn't feel like work. Because I was thinking about this. I feel like people say that find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I don't think that's actually what it is, because it's it's not that this isn't hard or that there aren't days where I really, really don't want to do something, or that there's tasks that I just dread. I think what it is that when you do something that has a sufficiently high upside for you, the hard work is worth it. And that to me is a very important distinction, because it's not that like I'm super stoked to do a bunch of budget proposals, or to get on a ton of sales calls, or to send follow-up emails. Like none of that is like stuff that I get excited about. I'm not having fun when I'm doing that. I'm trying to get to the fun part. And the fun part, like planning these projects, designing the games, designing the shows, actually filming stuff, bringing all these people together. To me, that payoff is high enough that all of the stuff that sucks about the admin and the sales and the emails and all of those pieces that are not my favorite thing to do, it's worth that effort because the payoff is high enough when it all works out. And I feel like a lot of times when I've burned out, it's because the payoff isn't there. You feel like you're doing the stuff that's sort of, it doesn't fill your cup. And so you're kind of grinding on stuff that you're like, yeah, I mean, whatever, I'll get it done. And maybe the code work is like kind of engaging, but you're not really working on something that feels super valuable. So you don't feel like you're contributing. And so then the upside starts to slip, but like the work doesn't change. You still have to send the emails. You still got to do the code reviews. You still got to do the Slacks. You're still having all the meetings, but you're not ever getting the payoff. And that I think is where burnout starts to come from, is you're no longer doing something that provides enough of a reward to make the hard stuff worth doing. And I think, I mean, that was true of my agency. Like when I had my agency, when I first did it, it was super fun. Like I could not believe that people would pay me to make stuff on the internet. It was such a cool feeling, such an exciting time, because I could show somebody something I built and I'd say, hey, if you give me $1,000, I'll make you one of these too. And they would be like, wow, cool. Here's $1,000. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. And like that sales stuff was all worth it. But then over time, the agency stuff stopped being rewarding because I felt like all I did was put out fires, and the things that I was building, I didn't know how to sell bigger or better things. I didn't know how to delegate properly. I didn't know how to price properly. And so I felt like I was constantly burning the candle at both ends, doing work that mostly I didn't enjoy, like admin and sales and accounting and things like that. And I didn't get to do the things that had high payoff. Like I didn't even get to design or build the sites anymore because I delegated that part because I understood it. But I couldn't delegate the other business parts because I didn't understand it well enough to know if somebody was doing a good job. And it sucked. And I burned out super hard. Like that was what led to my whole health crisis and going to Alaska and disappearing. I think all that kind of stuff. That's actually a really good point, Alan. Like, I think, the other thing too is if I had a path to put together the kind of money that I would need to retire, I think I would have. And I would, yeah, like you said, you're making more stuff now than when you went in a corporate gig. I think I would too. Like, I think I would leverage whatever I had to be able to do the stuff that I want to do. And there are things that I would do that I don't do now. Like, I would love to get back into making music. I would love to, try my hand at like starting a restaurant, or like getting way better at cooking, or even just like partnering up with somebody who's a great cook, and like helping them build a business around their talent as a chef. Uh, all that stuff would be super fun for me, and I'm not going to do it now. I couldn't do it safely with the amount of time that I have. It would be an abandoned project way too soon, and I think that would actually bum me out more than not doing it does. Um, but yeah, butcher their language so that you can get it exactly. I mean, that's been a problem for me too with my no, like, as much as we've traveled the world, I've never in my entire life been mistaken for a local. Like, people know instantly that I am from the US, and they like, I don't know, Marissa always gets mistaken for a local. Like, people think she's from wherever we are. And so we'll get seated in a restaurant, and they'll like give her the menu in the local language, and they'll give me the English menu. And then and it's funny in both ways, because like, for me, I'm always like, but wait, I speak Spanish. I speak like taxi cab Spanish. So not enough to be, I'm nowhere near fluent, but like, if I need to get directions or talk about what we're going to eat, I'm good at that. Um, so like, if you hand me a menu in Spanish, I'm actually in great shape. But no one ever hands me that one. And then like Marissa, when we first were traveling, like, her Spanish wasn't that great, so a lot of times we would have to trade menus. And then it was like, I got the eyebrow lift at like, oh, I see you're not just an American who only speaks English. And then Marissa would get this deeply disappointed, like, oh, I thought you were one of us. But yeah. What do you think about indie hackers, like those who build products to earn from? I mean, look, that's kind of what I'm doing, right? Like, I think the thing. So what I like is when somebody is having a lot of fun doing something, and they find a way that is mutually beneficial to offer those things to people in a way to make a living, right? Like, if you build a product and that product solves a real problem, and somebody can pay you a little bit of money, and it actually solves their problem, and you are able to make a living doing that, I love that. I think that's such a great way to exist. Where I start to get a little like looking at people sideways is, I remember when we were traveling, we spent some time in Thailand, and I met people who were doing like the Amazon drop shipping thing, where they would like order stuff from Alibaba, and then they would sell it on Amazon, and they made like, whatever, 50-60% markup. And their entire thing was just like trying to find a way to do as little work as possible to squeak out profit. I don't like that as much. I find that to be like a weirdly exploitative way of existing, because you're not providing value anymore. You're just sort of figuring out where you can insert yourself in the chain to like do a profit share. And like, whatever. Like, I'm not like judging you morally, but I respect that less, right? I think if you're building something that is fun for you to build, you're building something that solves a real problem, and you obviously you can build one or more of these, and it's able to pay your bills. That's so cool. Like, I love that. And I think that, in some cases, that ends up being something that gets funded, and you can see people who've like bootstrap businesses that then end up getting like venture funding, and they grow into something bigger. You see that people bootstrap it and keep it bootstrapped. Sometimes they keep it small, sometimes they get big. There are so many different ways that you can do this stuff. And the thing that I love is when you meet somebody who's like clearly cares, right? And I think the more I meet people, and the more I've kind of noticed what the commonalities are in my friend group, the people that I'm closest with are the people who are really enjoying themselves and really, really care. And that to me is like, that's the recipe for success. Because I know people who care a lot, but they just seem kind of incapable of having fun. Like they're always bummed about things. They're always sad because things aren't perfect or things aren't working exactly as they planned. And so, they're always like bummed because something's going bad. And I know people who are having a lot of fun, but they don't take anything seriously, and they kind of don't care, and they're just sort of like here for a good time, and it doesn't matter if anybody gets screwed over in the meantime. And to me, that sort of points to some issues that aren't my cup of tea, right? But people who are having a lot of fun and who care a lot tend to be working on hard problems that are important to them, that provide some kind of value, whether or not it's a value that is one that like, and it can be so many things. Like, uh, my friend Alex Hillman out in Philly is running like a co-working space, and it's so clear that like that community space is so important, and he always seems to be having a good time, and I think that's amazing. Like, Joel Hooks and John Lindquist started Egghead, and they're just having so much fun with it, and they just built like this whole thing. And every time you talk to Joel, he's got some interesting weird thing that he wants to demo, and like John's always like experimenting with some new thing that he's going to teach in his AI course. And like both of them are, and I don't really care about the AI stuff, and most of the things that they're talking to me about are things that I'm like, oh, I'm glad you're enjoying that, but like I'm not going to use it. Like it's just not something that I feel passionate about, but they do. And it's so much fun to hang out with them because they always have something interesting that they're like super stoked on, that they're really working toward. And this is true of like all the people that I care about. Like whenever I get on the phone with Emily Freeman or Sarah Drasner or Angie Jones, or, like this is just, these are the people that I've surrounded myself with, because every conversation is about something cool that somebody's working on. Like there's always like some cool thing, and they're always having a good time. And, you just get to hear passionate people solving hard problems. And that's like, those are the best people to have in my life. Um, but I think that there's a balance that can get tipped in either way, where like you care so much that you're sort of miserable to be around because nothing will ever be perfect, or you don't care at all, and that allows you to be kind of callous and careless. And I think both of those are not ideal. Um, next hardest part I need to tackle is I mean, it's still just the patience, right? Like I have a continually evolving set of big ideas, and every time I talk to a company, it's usually refined a little bit, and I learn a little bit more about what these companies are focused on, about who, where should I be even who should I even be talking to, right? Because when I first started, I had a lot of conversations with like individual developer relations people. Um, and I still have a ton of conversations with individual developer relations people, and it's amazing. But like I'd never spoken to somebody in a marketing department, really, like not externally. It was always like I kind of went in through the DevRel door. And over the years, I've kind of realized that like, if I talk to somebody in marketing, I can I can usually find a pathway to somebody who's got the access to budget, and we get to work with, like, we're still working with DevRel, but I don't have to like, because a lot of the challenge when you're doing sales is you have to figure out not just who the champion is for the project, and that's almost always somebody in DevRel, but you have to figure out who's going to approve it and fund it. And that's usually a head of marketing, a CMO, a director of engineering. Like somebody's got the budget that will then get approved so that DevRel can do the thing, or so that the engineering team can do the thing, or the marketing team can do the thing. And like, you don't want to put sales onto somebody who's not in that role. So like if I'm talking to somebody in DevRel, it doesn't make sense for me to go and say like, can you get this budget? Because now I'm asking them to go to their boss or their boss's boss or their boss's boss's boss and say, can I have this budget? Why would I put them through that, right? And also, why would I depend on somebody whose job is not sales, who doesn't, it's like asking somebody to do a different job. Um, and it takes me out of a position where I can sort of influence what happens in my life. because like what I want is I want the DevRel and I to cook on a bunch of great ideas, but then I want to be the one that gets a chance to talk to the head of marketing because I like this is what I want to this is what I care about, right? I love this project and I want to build it in a way that like I always want it to benefit the company. Like I'm not going to keep getting hired if I build things that are just fun for me to build. Like they have to have value, right? And I think the thing that I've been learning is how to navigate different organizations so that I'm able to talk to the people who care a lot about the specifics of the project, as well as the people who care a lot about just the high level outcomes of the project, and make sure that I'm able to have conversations on both of those levels so that it's, we're going to talk about how this is good for the company and we're going to talk about how this is good for the community and we're going to get something out there that's really true to the original vision. And I'm not putting it on somebody whose job is not sales to have to go and do internal sales to get the budget, right? And so that's been like one of the journeys. But then I think, that's the whole challenge. Bit of a different question, but you currently brainstorm a lot how to grow an open source project. Would you have some ideas or some in the chat? I mean, I think the major challenge is, it's all about building a healthy community, right? And so if you're growing an open source project, I think it's figuring out like what is the problem that developers have that the open source project solves? Where do those developers hang out? Is there a way that you can go there and be part of that community without actively selling something? Because like, for example, if somebody comes into the Code TV Discord and the only thing they've ever posted is a link to their project, like it's pretty clear that you're just self-promoting. Like you're not part of the community. You just like did a drive-by link drop. And that's, like we have a place to share projects and that's totally fine. But it's going to be harder for us to engage because we don't really know anything about it other than the fact that like you came out of nowhere, dropped a link and disappeared. If like the Code TV Discord is the place that you wanted to go in and let's say that our demographic is exactly the people you want to talk to because your open source project is for people who do the things that we do, then before you really dive in and talk about the project, you first want to be like part of that community and seen as somebody who is like helpful because it's nice to be helpful. And then when people, when you're talking about what you've done, it's naturally going to come up that you've built a tool to like assist in this. But if, I think the thing about growing an open source project is that open source is primarily a community thing. And a lot of the success or failure of a project is dependent on how strong the community is around that given project. Like when you look at things like, right now, the rapid growth of TanStack Start and how many people are talking about it despite it being like brand new. And for example, the what I would say is like a pretty aggressive, like almost gleeful celebration of the struggles that Next.js is having, you can kind of see the difference in those communities and in the way that folks have treated those communities. And I think you can see sort of where one has said like, I'm here to help, and where one has said, we want your money. And so that is an extremely vague answer to that question. As far as specific tactics, I mean, build things, write articles, tell stories. Like the biggest thing that most projects have to overcome is that I don't know what your project does. And when you post a link, I'm not going to click through that link unless I have a reason. And so what is it? What is like, who is it for? What are they struggling with? And what does this, like, how does this make it go away? It's the idea that like, people don't buy a drill, they buy a 1/4-inch hole. And because what we need, right, is to hang a painting, build a house, whatever it is that we're doing when we buy a tool. And like the specifics of the drill are important kind of, but really what we care about is that the end task has been completed. And I think that's really true with open source projects. A lot of times people want to talk about the benchmarks of open source, or they want to talk about the file size and things like that. And like those things are sort of important, but I don't care how small your project is if I don't know why I would use it in the first place. So I think it's more about explaining, what is the world like for somebody who doesn't use this tool, and how does it improve if somebody does use this tool? If you can get that story really tight and be really, really clear about who you're talking to, that also helps you filter down to where you should be talking about it. Because if your tool is only for Rust developers and you're hanging out in a JavaScript forum, it's not going to help you. You're not going to reach those people, right? So being really, really clear on who it is that uses it and why they use it and what the benefits are, and what pain point they were facing before that thing existed, all of that gives you basically market research. Like, what you're effectively doing is user research, right? And we all, I know everybody kind of gets resistant to this idea of user research, but like, if you talk to the people who really enjoy the thing that you do and you ask them what it was they were doing before, and why it was hard and why they adopted your tool in the first place, they're going to tell you exactly what to say to convince other people that it's the right thing for them, right? And so yes, you have to talk to people, and yes, you have to take notes, and yes, you have to like triage that information down into like themes and understanding what people want. But it's the kind of work that like, it's critically important to building something good. I'm like way off on a tangent now, so I'm gonna shut up. My Alaska health crisis bit, I've talked about it at length, but the short version is when I ran my agency for a long time, and I was overworked so hard that my beard fell out, and I had like big bald patches, and so I dumped my agency. I technically sold it, but really I just like got somebody to take over, so I wasn't financially responsible for it anymore. And I disappeared up to Alaska for a couple weeks with like no phone and no computer, so that I could be off the grid. And then kind of did a full reset on my life back in about 2014. Let's see. Yeah, something about just like, like it's very clear that, yeah, you're American, right? I'm like, oh, come on, man. I could be French, maybe. But like, even places where I'm pretty sure I look like I'm from there. Like we watched Eurovision, which is the Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams movie about the Icelandic Eurovision team. And I'm pretty sure like I have some Icelandic roots. Like the people in that movie look a lot like me. So, but like even in spots like that, like no, immediately American. Let's see. Is it worth it doing something you love and at the end there's no reward? What does that mean? Because like I am a firm believer in the idea that if you're going toward like a specific reward, and a specific reward could be anything from, like, I had a goal of, I want to earn 6 figures. I want to, I want a job at a world-renowned tech company. I want, so, whatever you set these goals, or it could be, like any sort of like destination, right? And if that's the reward, I'm actually a big fan of not doing that at all. I think that not having a reward encourages you to find things that are worth doing for their own sake, because I actually feel like there's a lot of disillusionment when you get the reward if you haven't planned what the next one is. And so a reward-based system sort of requires you to have a treadmill of things that you want to do, because once if you say, I want to make 6 figures, okay, you got a job, they pay you $100,000 a year. What next? You've completed the goal, right? You don't get a trophy that allows you to just sit down and be done for the rest of your life. You've still got a lot of years left. So what happens next, right? And I think the problem with reward-based stuff is that the only thing you can really do is keep moving goalposts, because when you hit the goalposts, you're still alive. So I think a lot more in terms of the intrinsic feedback loop being positive. When I do this thing, I feel like I spent my day well, right? When I do this thing, I feel like I put something good into the world that benefits people in a way that I find important, right? Those, like, for me, the rewards are like a secondary benefit. I want them. Like, I want to earn more money. I want to get recognized. I want, I'm vain, and I look at the surveys every year and I get sad because I'm not listed as everybody's favorite YouTuber. Like, of course I want the rewards, but like that's not why I do it, right? Because first of all, playing it that way, where you want to be everybody's favorite streamer, changes what you do, because you're working toward that outcome, that reward. And it's, the things that you do in order to get that reward might actually alter the way that you spend your time. And maybe they're not things that I would normally do. And I don't want to be somebody who does things I wouldn't normally do in order to get a reward. I want to be somebody who does things that are inherently rewarding for having done them at all. So I think of it as more of like a regret minimization technique. I'm trying to exist in a way that will create the lowest probability that I find myself on my deathbed looking back thinking, I wish I would have tried that, or I wish I wouldn't have hurt that person like that, or I wish I wouldn't have done this thing that cut off all these avenues to me. I feel like I am very much looking for a world where I get onto my deathbed and I look back and I go, fucking nailed it, and then I just die. Right? Like, I feel like that's the best possible outcome, is that I get to the end and I go, I tried everything I wanted to try. I'm proud of the way that I treated people. I'm proud of the things that I chose to do with my time. I'm good to go. So it depends on what you mean by reward. And I would say, if you're doing something that doesn't feel rewarding to do, and you like, that's, I don't know. And I mean, there's also like, there's stuff that is very rewarding to do that is also maybe not a job, right? Like I really like to cook, but I also don't have any intentions of trying to make money cooking, unless I get to a point where money is not an object anymore. And for that basically means that, like, that is a thing that I have explicitly defined in my mind as a hobby. I have to do other work to enable myself to do that hobby. If I was trying to become like a cook for money, I really enjoy and find cooking rewarding, but I would find it really unrewarding to take the salary hit that would be required for me to become a professional cook. And therefore, for me personally, I have decided that the trade-off is that cooking is a hobby, code is a job, production is a job, and that allows both of those things to be rewarding when they do them for the sake of doing them. And it keeps me aligned with, like, I do the production and the code because it makes me money. It's rewarding to do those things, but it makes me money, and I can use that money to also do the things that don't make me money, like read books and cook and take vacations, right? And I don't think it would be rewarding for me to be like a travel TikTok influencer. And so even if I could make money doing it, I don't really like the idea of having to document everything that I do while I'm traveling. I kind of like, I don't know. I don't think that would be fun for me. I wouldn't find that super rewarding. I want to have I'll do a production where I go and I travel and we capture it. And an Anthony Bourdain Parts Unknown style show is very much on my list of productions I'd love to make. But that shouldn't be every trip, right? And I don't want to have to do that. I want that to be something I want to do. Very, very, very long answer to a simple question. Sorry about that. Where are we at? I am engineering management as a function, still relevant, possibly more relevant than ever, because I think that working with AI agents is effectively engineering management. If you think about what it is, it's a lot of code review. It's a lot of thinking about outcomes. It's a lot of writing plans. It's a lot of herding different types of cats. So it is extraordinarily relevant. So let's see. Nothing like putting together a campaign that works well where everyone shines. Absolutely. I mean, it's like, it feels so good. Yeah, TanStack is killing it. They're doing great. Anti-AI person, that's me. Yeah, let's see. Where are we going? If just doing it isn't rewarding, do you really love it? This is actually a really good question, because I think that you can love something and also not find like the constant doing of it rewarding. And I would say um, I'll give you a very concrete example. When I first got this studio, one of the first projects I did was building out this. This is a stage flat. This isn't a real wall. And to build that, I had to, go to the hardware store. I worked with my friend Jack Harrington. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos. I worked with my dad. He has a truck, so we went and loaded a bunch of lumber into his truck and drove it out here. And I did this big project where I built 4 of these stage flats. I also built a brace to stand them up, and I did some painting and like all sorts of these interesting projects. I loved doing that project because it helped me understand more about what goes into production design. I found, well, okay, let me rephrase. I found it very rewarding to do that project, and I absolutely did not love it. If that makes sense. Like I know very clearly now that like I want to hire people to do production design, because as much as I really enjoyed learning how that stuff works, I also know that I don't want to do it for a job. And I don't want to do it for a hobby either. Like I want to work with somebody to draw up a plan and then allow them to do the thing that they're good at. Does that make sense? So I think that it is possible to like love a thing but not find the act of doing it rewarding. I love a good production design. I do not want to do production design. Listing all your career goals on a sheet of paper, thinking you hit them over 10 years. Then you find out you got them all. That's exactly what happened to me too. I was in my late 30s and I realized that like I thought I had set some really high goals, but this industry is so weird where it can feel like everything is really far away, and then with a couple short hops, a lot of gaps close, and suddenly you're way further than you ever thought you could be, and you're like out of ideas. Where are we at? Yeah. Some unexpected lessons or insights I've gained since pivoting to Code TV. I think, I mean, a lot of what we talked about today with the one of the hardest things about doing something, big and weird and ambitious like Code TV, where a lot of stuff we're doing is kind of net new for most of the people we're trying to partner with on it. There's so much patience involved in doing it, because you can't just like move people across this finish line. You have to, you're in an effort to like make something exist that never existed before, and also help people build enough of a mental model, help build the right value proposition, help mitigate risks, help understand how different companies function, so that you can fit this very ambitious idea safely into an existing organization at the right time, and with the right people to get it out into the world intact, right? And that's something that I think historically I would have found very frustrating, that would have led to me being kind of resentful and grumpy, because why won't people just trust me and let me do this thing that's so obviously right? And it's been a big effort to get myself shifted into a way that it's like, okay, it's I joke that I'm a persistence hunter, right? Like the idea is, if you keep running after an idea for long enough, eventually somebody will get tired and lay down, and they just have to let you do it. And I used to do that when I was in leadership at Netlify. I'd just kind of wear people down, because I was like, I have a clear vision, and if you don't have a better idea, I'm going to do this. And eventually somebody goes, yeah, whatever, just do it. And that's kind of where I'm learning a big part of my strength is I'm willing to chase an idea even after I've been told no a bunch of times. And like the idea has shifted. If you look at what I'm pitching today versus what I was pitching in 2022 when I first left and started Code TV, it's wildly different. The complexity has changed, the specifics have changed, but like the general ideas are still intact, and I'm still chasing a lot of the same big ideas. And I'm just getting better, I think, at recognizing that it takes a long time, and recognizing that the factors that control whether or not you get to move forward with a big idea aren't really the ones that you might expect. So yeah, let me, we're at time, so I'm going to go ahead and make that be the end of where we're at. Set up and tear down. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the thing. Like you don't want to do it. Yeah, be a persistence hunter. I think being a persistence hunter is maybe it is both incredibly frustrating and incredibly rewarding because it's you can't do the really, really big stuff on an impulse. It's going to require a ton of coordination and help and different people and lots of experience and lots of money and lots of time and it's so unbelievable when you see that you've been able to coordinate this thing where like 30 people came together to make something awesome, but you can't, like, you won't get it on the first try. You got to do it on your own, and then you do it with 3 people, and then you figure out how to do a little bit more. And but just don't lose sight of it, and keep in mind that iterating toward a goal isn't conceding on what the final product can be. It's just giving people a mental model of what's possible and convincing them to go 10% further, right? So anyways, it's going to be the last stream I do for 2025. We will be back in probably the first half of January sometime with more of everything. So we got one more episode of Web Dev Challenge. The finale is going to come out next week, so keep your eyes peeled for that. We are coming back next year with more Web Dev Challenge. We've got a new series that we're cooking up with our friends over at Replay. We're potentially going to be doing a few really big things if my persistent hunting has paid off the way that I hope it has. And we are still obviously looking for more partners. So if you or someone is tied to the marketing department and just got your budget for 26 and you're trying to think of what cool things you could do to reach out to developer communities, hit us up at Code TV. Would love to talk to you. Where do you double down learning wise? Man, when it feels right, and I don't have a good answer. Go broad until it feels right, and then go deep. Happy holidays, y'all. We will see you in 2026.